Okay, well, we're hitting the hour. I'll go ahead and just get started briefly with our first couple of slides here. First of all, welcome to everybody to IslandOraCon 2025. This is day one, community. Got the logo there on the sides too. And we wanted to thank our sponsors for IslandOraCon 2025. So we have Born Digital and Discovery Garden are our gold sponsors, and we'll be hearing from both of them today during the talks. I'll leave that up for just a minute. People are still kind of streaming in, so I'll give them a couple minutes to get in and get situated. But so happy to see so many familiar faces and some new faces as well. That's exciting. All right, yeah, we got lots of people still coming in. I should note for everybody at the top here that this is being recorded. So every day is going to be recorded automatically. We obviously, if there's anything that people don't want shared, we're happy to kind of cut that out of any final product that we share in the future. But just so everyone knows, it's being recorded and transcribed as well. Just going to give it one more minute. I know we have UPEI here. Do we have some of our other watch parties in the chat yet? Maybe not yet. That's okay. All right. I'm going to, Las Vegas. Oh, Las Vegas is hosting for tomorrow. Wonderful. Perfect. Well, welcome to our UNLV folks that are here individually. All right. Let's get started. Give me one moment to switch between presentations here. All right. Perfect. Can everyone see that okay? Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Oop. Give me one moment here. I'm having a technical problem. That's par for the course for a virtual conference, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So again, welcome to everyone to IslandOraCon 2025. We are getting started here with our plenary opening keynote. I am so thrilled to have everyone with us here virtually. I know that originally this was going to be an in-person conference, and I know there were some mixed feelings around changing it to virtual. So I'm happy that as many of you are still here, even though it is virtual. And I know that we're going to be looking for more opportunities for in-person connection in the upcoming year and hopefully at next year's conference. No promises, but that's what I'll be looking forward to. And we'll also be looking to be in person at some other external conferences as well. So we will have some of those in-person opportunities to connect. So I wanted to introduce myself. I know there are some new faces here, some new folks who maybe have not seen me on Slack or on the Google group, but my name is Aubrey Shanahan, and I am the new community manager for Islandora. I have a background in libraries and archives, and I'm so happy to be part of this incredible community. It's been wonderful to start getting to know some of you, getting to know some of your repositories, and everyone's been so welcoming and helpful in these first few months. So I am so grateful to this community. Our current board members are Noah Smith, Cole Scalessa, and Jerry Lawless. And I've also shared here our partner organizations. So we have the University of Prince Edward Island, McMaster University, York University, Discovery Garden, and Born Digital. And we are so grateful to our partner members and to all of our members for their important contributions. They help make the Islandora project possible and what it is today. So super grateful to those members. So I'd love it if folks introduce themselves in the chat. So let us know where you're joining from. Do you have your own mini watch party of animals in your house? Share, where you're watching from, what your environment is with us in the chat so we can get to know each other. I'll give folks a couple of minutes to do that in the chat. Awesome. Massachusetts, Chicago, Iowa, Florida, Pittsburgh, Ontario, Vancouver, Toronto, more Pittsburgh. We love our Pittsburgh folks. Boston, Oklahoma, wonderful. Oklahoma's close to me. I'm coming in from Denton, Texas, so Grand Junction, University of Iowa. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. Boulder, amazing. People from all over the place. That is wonderful. Okay, well, keep introducing yourselves in the chat, get to know each other, see if you have neighbors joining us. But I am so excited to see the diversity of where everyone's from. That is wonderful. Okay, Salt Lake City, Iowa City, California. Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to move on, but please still keep sharing your locations, share about yourself. Let's get to know each other and build some community here. I want to take a moment to thank the IslandoraCon 2025 Planning Committee. So this would not have been possible without this group of people. I joined this process partway through, and the folks you see here are really responsible for cultivating the excellent presentations you'll be enjoying over the next few days. So Amy, Lena, Carrie, Corey, Emily, Manish, Natalie, Sarah, and Tammy, thank you so much for all of your hard work on this conference. And if you're in the audience and you see them, feel free to thank them too, because they've done a really wonderful job here. Okay, so we're going to move into some of the housekeeping, including the code of conduct. So we have the full code of conduct available on the website, and it's linked in here. I'll be sending slides out post-conference, so you'll have all of these slides available to you. Please note that Code of Conduct volunteers have a green heart next to their name, so you can see that on mine. Lena and Amy also have it. And we just wanted to remind some of the core values of the Code of Conduct here as we're getting started with this conference. So we are considerate, we are inclusive, we are respectful. When we disagree, we do this in a polite and professional manner. We are collaborative. We say thank you and we let people know when they have done good work. when we are unsure, we ask for help and we are respectful of each other's time. That's always important, especially during a virtual conference. We want to make sure that everyone's keeping to time and is respectful of those time limits. So if anyone has any questions around this, if you run into any problems, if you're having disagreements, or if you just want some support during the conference, feel free to reach out to any of those folks that have that green heart in their name. Okay, some more housekeeping here. So for accessibility, as I mentioned, we are recording, and this is including a transcript with that recording, as well as closed captions are on, so you can toggle those on and off. Should be on the bottom bar there of your Zoom, and you should be able to click the button to show them or hide them, whatever your preference is. And if you have any other accessibility concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help sort that out if there's anything else we can do for you. Um, we have the official hashtag for IslandoraCon. So hashtag IslandoraCon 2025. If you're posting to socials, sharing anything online, please feel free to use the IslandoraCon hashtag. We'll go through and be monitoring that and share anything that you're posting. Make sure to give it a like, that sort of thing. So um, definitely use the hashtag. We've also got some watch parties going on, as I mentioned. And if you are hosting a watch party, please post a photo. If you want to share it in the Zoom chat, that would be great, or on Slack. And definitely share it on socials as well so we can post that. We want to support those efforts. And yeah, all right. Yes, Blue Sky. Thanks, Noah. We do have Blue Sky now. That's kind of our main social channel that we're using. So that's where, especially if you're on Blue Sky, it's going to be easy for us to repost things. All right. And then the last thing I have on here, the community brainstorm slash notes. So I will post a link to this in the chat, but I wanted to kind of have a way for us to all take notes, brainstorm, anything that maybe doesn't quite fit into a Zoom chat can go into these notes. It's just an extra way for us to kind of connect and share ideas. So I'll post a note to that shortly in the chat. And there's no pressure to use it. I just figured it'd be good to have almost like community scratch paper for the whole event. There's tabs for each of the days and that sort of thing. So I'll share that shortly. And again, if you have any questions or need Zoom help, please reach out to me. Easiest way to get to me is going to be DM on Slack or in Zoom. You can DM people individually in Zoom. You can click the three dots over their name and send a message to them. All right, so since we have so many new faces in the crowd here, I just wanted to share some community resources that we have available. I already mentioned Slack. It's a great way to connect with other members. It's going to be one of the quickest and liveliest forms of community resource available. So if you have support concerns, questions, comments, that sort of thing, you can always hop into the Slack and check that out. All of these are linked out in this slide as well. So if you're interested after the fact, you can go through and click all the links. We've got the Google group, which is great for news and official communications, etc. Thanks, Noah, for sharing some of those links in the chat. We've got the GitHub, which is where you're going to have technical contributions, and it's a place to raise any issues you're having. The Community Wiki, which is information on implementing and using Islandora. And if you are sharing issues with us, I hope you'll join the weekly tech call. So if you're putting any issues in, we want to make sure that they're followed up on thoroughly, and the tech call is a great place to do that and to get some support as well. So definitely recommend that. And in general, following our community calendar, which I can link to as well, that's where you'll see things like the weekly tech call and the monthly open meetings, which is our other kind of main communication channel. So we cover a very topics in this meeting. Suggestions are always welcome, but we try to keep it kind of topical to things that are going on in the community. exciting releases. So we just had Rosie a couple months ago gave a talk about UPI, like a little sneak preview of what they're presenting on at this conference. So it's a great way to stay involved with everybody. And I am happy to take your suggestions if you have an idea for one of these meetings. All right, and I'm going to hand over to Noah.
Thanks, Aubrey. So it's my privilege as the current Islandora Foundation board chair to say a few words. I was delighted to dig up all of these little graphics, and partially just amazed to see that it's been 19 years of Islandora. There have been so many things in the last, the last 5 years, not to mention the 15 years before that. So as you said, next year is going to be a big year. I think we're probably obligated to do another conference and probably an in-person one for 20 years. But just as a reminder, a few of the key dates in 2006 was when this software that we all work with every day was created at UPEI's Robertson Library, and it's so delightful to see the whole room of folks there watching. In 2010, a big piece of funding came from the Canadian government to build what became Islandora 7. In 2013, the foundation was created and Islandora 7 was released. And then just a couple of years after that, work began on the current iteration of Islandora, what was then called Claw. And it seems so recently that Islandora was released, but it was really 2021. And of course, that's the Islandora 2.0.0. That's the version that we're all working with now. Hopefully, some of you remember the old hamburger and bento box diagrams, and some of these logos are from the history of Islandora as archivists. It was fun to go and dig around and find some of these things. All right, next slide, please. So there are many ways we can measure our community or express what is the Islandora community. This is one way. These are the list of institutions who are currently providing financial assistance to the foundation. We have a variety of different levels, and if your institution is not amongst these, please look into whether it's possible to support the foundation, because we have staff, we have software, we have community to maintain. Oh, did I miss Iowa? All right, we'll edit these slides, Natalie. Good catch. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is another way. These are the folks, the individuals, not the institutions, but the individuals who've contributed to the Islandora code base over the past 2 years. Now, I recognize there are even more code bases, not just Islandora/Islandora, right? So this community is even larger than these little GitHub avatars. But it is, again, another way to measure our community. Next. Another way is by the installs. This is the map that's on the website. And every one of the little dots here represents an Islandora install. I think some of them are still Islandora 7, and the majority now are Islandora 2.0. I had to go really wide on this to get the cluster in New Zealand as well as the one in Alaska. Finally, one more way to measure our community are the leadership group participants. These are perhaps the most active in governance in the foundation. So I just wanted to call out and give thanks by name to Nicole and Sarah, who are our co-chairs of the last year, as well as Amy and Annie and Aubrey and Brandon and Carolyn, Donald, Moses, Don Richards, Jerry, Emily, Manish, Mark, Natalie, Nick, Rosie, Rebel, and Yamil. Thank you all so much. And really, thank you, each of you, for everything you do for Islandora, however you do it, because there are many, many other ways to capture what is the Islandora community, not just the 4 or 5 that I chose here. So over the last 5 years, we've all been working on Islandora 2.0. And last year, in 2024, we set out to create a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And when these slides are released, you'll be able to click through to the PDF of the strategic plan that's linked here. But the top strategic objectives really were to hire a community manager and re-engage the community. And we have done that. Aubrey has joined us and has been doing a terrific job. I'm so thankful that for all the people who were involved in the hiring process, in the strategic planning process, to get us to where we are. And of course, the work is not done. So the next priorities, as you'll hear from Aubrey later, are to facilitate adoption and lower barriers to entry. And we also have a number of governance and community participation evolutions to discuss in the next few days. The highest priorities of these will be to establish and maintain a new roadmap with the new roadmap committee. As well as Aubrey at the AGM will be presenting her 1-year plan, her community plan, with action items based on input from current users. So she's been soliciting input in a variety of ways over the last few months and will continue to do so, and will continue to update that plan. And the new leadership group will work with her to implement it. So this is how we are organized now. This is sort of a classic hub and spoke model, where this leadership group that I've mentioned a few times is at the center. There's some overlap with the board. There's typically 2 of the 3 board members sit on the leadership group. And then we have a number of committees that each have representation on the leadership group. There are additional, there's representation for a variety of membership states as well. So if you want to join the leadership group, there's a couple paths. One path is to join and perhaps chair one of these committees, and another path is to become a financial supporter of the foundation. And each of those different levels gets to send some number of representatives to the leadership group. So it's rewarding work. I encourage you all to consider it if your institution has funds, or if you prefer to work sort of by labor donations instead of financial donations, please join a committee. We'd be delighted to have you. So the committees here are, there's some existing committees and there's a few new committees, and I'm just going to run through them. The existing committees are metadata and documentation. Now, these used to be called metadata interest group and documentation interest group. But we wanted to be clear that the work that they do is really core to the mechanics of the foundation, and we wanted to raise their recognition to that of a committee. So I thank Rosie and Yamil for their efforts in chairing these committees for the next year. We also have our technical advisory group. This is definitely a committee, although we did not change the name of it. And so I thank Annie for her tireless efforts there. And the last existing committee is the Code of Conduct Committee. Amy, I'm not sure if you're the sole chair right now, but I decided to give you credit because you were doing an excellent job in the past, and I really am thankful that you're able to keep on with this work. So what are these new committees? One is the Roadmap Committee. Islandora has had a number of sort of hand-wavy roadmaps in the past. Our commitment now is to create and maintain a consistent, frequently updated roadmap that sets expectations for current and considering adopters of Islandora as to what they should expect on a 1 to 3 year time horizon. The Events Committee will take on planning and execution of cons and camps and other events. As you could hear in Aubrey's remarks earlier, there are a lot of possibilities, a lot of potential for what we could do. And we need to sort of lay out what are our strategies, what are our objectives, and then look at what do we have the volunteer effort to pull off successfully, and just take on what we can that's successful and useful for the community. And the membership committee, this will focus on growing both the financial supporting membership, as well as I didn't really have room for it. I really view this as the membership and fundraising or grants committee. There is a lot of money available for software projects in the public, doing public good. And so grants are certainly a piece of this membership committee. So if you're interested in either membership or some form of fundraising, primarily grants, I would guess, please do express some interest in this committee. Finally, I just wanted to give credit to the LAC GLAM interest group. They have put on a terrific speaker series over the last year. Again, when the links are available, the activity report provides an excellent summary. And then there'll be two new working groups. So today, Mark Jordan is giving a talk on the sort of current and future state of Islandora Workbench. And we're anticipating that a Islandora Workbench working group will spin up out of those conversations to bring Islandora Workbench inside of the foundation. And secondly, Aubrey is looking to create an adoption working group to primarily address those issues of adoption in terms of cold start problems and make sure we have the right documentation and so forth. So if you're interested in joining a committee or starting an interest group or anything like that, please do reach out to Aubrey. And again, this community involvement interest form will be linked from the notes. I'll find the link after I hand this back to Aubrey and post it as well. But thank you again for everything that you do.
Great. Thank you so much, Noah. So as Noah just mentioned, I have been working on this one-year community plan, and it's going to be presented at the annual general meeting, and that's on Thursday. There's no registration required, so if you have additional colleagues who can't join us for the conference, they'll be able to access this event from our community calendar. I'll be posting a link directly to the Zoom the day before, so they'll be able to click on that and join us for the AGM. And that's where I'll be presenting this plan. It's a relatively comprehensive plan, and you'll hear me say this a bunch more times. It's just a starting point, and it is an iterative process. So this is something that I see as a collaborative effort with all of you. A lot of the ideas that are in it have come from conversations that I've had with community members, with the leadership group. It's just kind of focusing our efforts in this direction. And with the plan, I'll also have a preliminary calendar for the first couple of quarters to help us kind of stay on track with that plan. So very excited to share a little bit more about that with all of you on Thursday. To assist in that, one of the ways that I've been collecting feedback that Noah mentioned is this community survey. I would really love it if you haven't completed this survey, if you would take the time to fill it out for us. It's going to assist with those changes that we're working on, and it's going to let you have your voice heard as an institution that's using Islandora. It's not by any means comprehensive, but it will give us, some guideposts to add to change this plan as we go along, and to help share any resources that you might have with me. I'm still relatively new, so I will take all the help I can get, all the advice I can take from all of you. I'm happy to do so. So if you want to take some time, if you have moments during the breaks today, maybe the breakout sessions later, if you want to just take a few minutes to fill this out, it's not super long and it is incredibly helpful to my work as we go into the next financial year. So up next, I wanted to just highlight a few of the sites that I've seen in my early days here at Islandora that have really jumped out to me. I know there's new folks in the chat, so if you wanted to take just a quick sampling of some really great sites that are using Islandora, I hope that that's exciting for you to see kind of the great work that's being done at all these institutions. One of the conversations I had early on, thanks to Carolyn Friedrich, was with the University of Pittsburgh, who showed me some of their excellent sites, including Historic Pittsburgh, which I actually had used on a trip to Pittsburgh myself as a tourist, and found it to be a fantastic resource. And I was so excited to learn that it was an Islandora site. I also, before I even joined Islandora, I had seen Natalie Bauer post about the Iowa Digital Library, which launched recently, and you'll hear more about at the conference. And that was, it's an excellent resource for Iowans, folks at the University of Iowa, and it's just beautifully done. It's really nice, and they've put a lot of great work into that. When I was working on a grant earlier on in the year, one of the things we needed for that grant was examples of sites that maybe had ecological climate change resources in them. And Mark Jordan was kind enough to reach out and share Simon Fraser University's climate change and ecology collections that included an Indigenous perspective. So this was not only helpful for our grant application, but it was so interesting to review the resources available in there. And last but not least on this slide, Rosie led an excellent review of the UPEI collections, as I mentioned, at one of our open meetings. And their collection of sites, their multi-site is incredible. And I'm excited for you all to hear more about that as the conference goes along as well. If you're interested in sharing your repository, having it more widely spread, we will be looking to, as part of this year plan that I'm building, do some case studies as well as a user showcase. Those case studies will be more intensive. They're going to require interviews. I'm looking to create some digital materials to go along with that. And we're going to have a whole new page on the website with that. So if you're interested in doing a case study with me, I'm more than happy to start working on that with you. The goal is to help users understand kind of the requirements from top to bottom of the process of implementing Islandora, whether that's, down from a DIY installation all the way up to those great, beautiful vendor installations as well. We want to give folks an idea of what it's actually like to go through that process. All right, so we are almost at the end here of our plenary talk, but I wanted to take a little bit of time to go over the schedule. I know that when I go to conferences, sometimes, I miss going over the schedule, and it's nice to see everything kind of laid out from top to bottom here. So we'll just go through some of these excellent sessions. You can see we are here at the plenary for the community showcase. And after that is done, we'll take a quick little break and we'll come back with the community and sponsorship lightning talks. So we'll have the Islandora documentation interest group / committee now from Yamil. We will have the Fedora community update from Aaron Griffith. We will have a presentation on Aurora from Noah, and then a Discovery Garden update from Johnny Stevens there. And that's from 10 to 10:45 Pacific. We'll take another quick little break and we'll go into the Islandora Workbench session. I know I'm really excited for that one. So it's 5 years in. Let's think about the next 5 as we kind of collectively come together to work for the future of Workbench. Super important. Not on this slide, but something that I need to mention here is there are going to be breakout groups. So we wanted to make sure that everyone has networking time. We can do, specific topics of interest in these breakout groups if you'd like. It can be a general chat meetup time. It's kind of something that we want to work with you all to cultivate different rooms so that people can talk about those different interests. So that will be from 12 to 12:30-ish, I think, Pacific time. And then following that, we will have the analytics and security sessions. So we have Taming the Crawlers using Cloudflare to manage bots and optimize data aggregation from Don Richards. and then making Islandora observable from Jonathan Hunt and Chris Burgess at Catalyst. For our day two, we'll have a plenary from Don Richards there on the Digital Repository Environment Survey. Please note that tomorrow we will be starting a little earlier. So we'll be starting at that 8 Pacific time, 11 Eastern time. So just make note that we will be starting a little bit earlier. I know there's some confusion for some folks about today being a little later. Following that plenary, we will have the user engagement / collections management sessions. We have multi-repository Islandora management at Vassar College, and that's from Nicole Scalessa. APs leveraging Islandora's potential to enhance discovery and foster civic engagement in challenging times. That's from Sabrina Bocniera at the American Philosophical Society. And then using Islandora in LIST to teach information organization and repository collections from Martin Halbert. And then following that, we'll have breaks between all of these. We'll have the user testing / usability session, the League of Extraordinary Users testing the Islandora 2.0 starter site. I love that name. So fun from the folks at FBLC. Then the path they take, influencing and understanding the use of Vassar College Digital Library from Nicole Scalessa again. And we'll have a quick break, and then the Islandora Views workshop / hack doc, which is going to be an incredible collaborative session. Many thanks for Amy putting that together, and for all those other folks for stepping up to help run that. Very much looking forward to that session. It'll be great. And that's the one part of the community notes that I have that we won't have a specific slot for because that workshop has their own documents that they will handle. Day 3 is jam-packed with lots of amazing sessions. So we have migrations at scale, migrating Islandora sites with millions of objects. We have migrating metadata to modern Islandora, challenges, strategies, and lessons learned. Bringing the University of Iowa libraries into Islandora Modern, challenges and opportunities. The Islandora upgrade at UPEI's Robertson Library. A Tale of Migration, Florida Virtual Campuses, FLVC Path to Islandora 2.0. So those are the first two kind of migration sessions. And then we'll move into the integration sessions, which are bridging gaps and building connections, Islandora integrations at Pitt, and introducing Scalaridae. Who knows if I said that? A new framework for building Islandora microservices. And then following that, the architecture session. So that is architecting Islandora for consortia, flipping the script, migrating existing content to a node media relationship, Islandees, surveying repository content as a static site, accessibility audit and overview, and then creating an institutional repository with Islandora. And then day 4, last but not least, we'll have that AGM. Again, no registration is required for that. So if folks want to join in, they're more than welcome to. And then we also have the hack doc. So the work for the hack doc that we're planning is the not necessarily a move, but kind of a move from context to ECA. There's some complications there and conversations to be had that I know folks are working on. Many thanks, they're not on the slide here, but many thanks to Akanksha and Annie and Yamil for kind of running the ship there. And I'll be helping with that as well. So lots of great sessions here. I hope that you can find something in every single day. Keeping it single track makes it easier. And I hope that you'll attend all of them because I think, folks have worked really hard on them and I think they're all wonderful sessions with a lot to teach all of us. So with that, I wanted to open the floor for any questions. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns about the logistics of the conference? Anything like that? I saw a question about the recordings that Sarah answered. The recordings will be available after the conference. All of the sessions are being automatically recorded through Zoom. And we are going to, we'll give it some time, obviously, because folks did register for this, but we will probably be releasing these on a wider scale, as Noah mentioned. They will be publicly available on the YouTube channel afterwards. Let me see if I missed any other questions. Yes, slide decks will be made available alongside the recordings. So you will get access to all of that. We'll send out a post-conference email to all attendees that will have all of the slide deck information in there for you. And yes, every single session will be recorded. Again, the only reason we won't post anything from the conference to YouTube is if someone specifically requests us to take it out. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? Questions for me as a community manager? No? Perfect. Okay, well, I did want to really briefly share that community notes link that I promised. So let me pull that up really quick. Pausing my screen share. Let me grab those notes because I would really like it if we could utilize this, share some of that information out with each other, share our thoughts. Just a nice tool to encourage some community. So I've posted that document in the chat, so you'll be able to access that. Feel free to save that. I'm not sure if there's a way for me to pin it, but I will try to continue to bring us back to that and share that resource in case anyone does want to use it. All right. Well, if there are not any more questions, I can go ahead. We can take a break. It's a little early because I talked way too fast in that presentation, but we could take a little bit of an extended break. We'll be coming back in about 15 minutes to hear from the sponsor talk / lightning community talks. And we'll be kicking that off with Yumil. So we'll see you all back here in about 15 minutes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I am Tammy at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So I'll be your host for this next section. So we are going to be doing the Islandora Community Sponsorship Lightning Talk. So we're going to be hearing from Yamil Suarez at Berkeley College, Boston Conservatory. Also, if I mispronounce anyone's name, please do correct me. And Johnny Stevens from Discovery Garden, Noah Smith from Born Digital, and Aaron Griffith from Fedora. So Aubrey, you're going to be powering through the slides?
We're going to have everyone share their slides
Just share it.
individually.
Okay, all
So
right.
they're all co-hosts.
They're
They
all
should be
good.
good to go.
All right. Is there an order who is starting first, or do they know?
Yamil is going to go first.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
great. So take it away.
Thank you very much. Can folks see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Thank you. First thing to note, I am using the older term for this group. So please bear with me as I adjust to the new terminology. So this is my lightning talk about the Islandora interest group, and I'm soon to be the chair of this group, and I work for Berkeley College and the Boston Conservatory. First, for those that are brand new to this community, I wanted to demonstrate how to find our official docs. And you start by going to the islandora.ca site, and there's a link in the upper left that says docs, and you will see this slide, and the first link on the left that I highlighted actually takes you to our docs. And again, if you're brand new to the community, I recommend you check out our quick start section that we show you how to run Islandora locally or find out how to use our online sandbox server. Another great section is the section below called concepts to explain some of the high-level concepts of how Islandora 2 is designed. And finally, the glossary, which is a curated list of terms that will come up often when you're a part of our community. Now, let's talk about DIG, or soon to be called DC. The main purpose of DIG is to coordinate the creation and maintenance of Islandora community documentation. Though a bit surprisingly, we are not responsible for writing the documentation. We instead have a stewardship role. The way the community has been approaching documentation is that the community itself writes the documentation, and we take the typical crowdsource approach for this. But we could always use a bigger crowd so we can get more work done. And I'm doing this presentation partially to see if I can interest somebody else to want to join and help with documentation or help with this group. Now, Dig has its own website, is hosted on GitHub, and here's a QR link to it and the link. And one of the most useful things from this particular little website is you'll see a folder has our past meeting minutes, and you'll see the agendas for our upcoming meetings. Now, the goals of Dig include establishing documentation best practices and collaborative workflows. We also spend time going over documentation related issues, and these are usually submitted to us via GitHub. Now, like many other groups and now committees, we have co-conveners. Currently, we have 3, and the main responsibility for a convener is to make sure we have our meetings once a month. And I wanted to mention that one of our co-conveners will be stepping down in August, so please reach out to me if you'd be interested in filling in our 3rd co-convener role past August. Now, how can you participate in DIG or DC? The most simple way is to join our monthly meetings, which happen the 2nd Wednesday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern. And here I'm showing again that same link to our homepage, where if you go to the agenda for the next meeting, you'll see whatever the Zoom link is for that meeting. Now I want to talk about what I like to call dig low-hanging fruits, or small actions that you may be able to take to start participating in writing documentation, or specifically with this group. Now, one of them is that when we do have our monthly meetings, it's nice to have a few people there present so we can bounce off ideas. One example is if someone donates a piece of content for documentation, it's good to bounce off this idea. So where in the table of contents we should put in that bit of new information. You could always reach out to us and tell us about any misspellings or bad grammar in the documentation, or alert us of perhaps a section that you wish should appear in documentation that is not there yet. And please know that all of these steps do not require any technical skill to do. Now, it can be overwhelming or a little bit intimidating to join an existing open source group. And the standard suggestion that I was taught and I follow with any new group is to watch from the sidelines. Sometimes we call it lurking. And in the case of Dig, what this would mean is just drop into our monthly meetings, just keep your camera off, stay on mute, and just watch us work for a couple of months. And when you feel more comfortable, start giving us your feedback and your opinions, or volunteer for some small tasks that we can use some help with. Now, if you cannot make it to those meetings, there is an existing Slack channel just for documentation. You can put something at your convenience to us about the documentation process. Now, I had a slide like this in the last Islandora conference, where I was just thanking those that had contributed to the documentation. So I'm recreating that slide, and I use the standard get log command to get a sampling of people that changed even just one line in documentation since the last conference. And I'm sure I met those that just updated some README in a separate repo. So just thank you for those that have contributed in the past. And I do hope that someone here may contribute between now and the next conference, and I'll add your name up here. I also do want to give special thanks to the Florida Virtual Campus. That group launched their own public website full of all this great Islandora documentation that anyone in the world can use. So thank you for bringing that to the world or to this community. And finally, there's my email address, ysuarez@berkeley.edu, if you want to reach out to ask me questions directly about how this process documentation, how this new committee will be working. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emil. I think our next speaker, are we holding Q&A for the end, Aubrey?
Yes, yeah, for the end of it.
So the next we're going to hear from Erin Griffith. Oh.
Hi, thank you. Let me just get set up here. So thanks, Emil, for that. Really interesting and strong advocacy for getting involved for non-technical folks. I don't have to give half of my presentation now on behalf. We can just insert Fedora instead of Islandora there in lieu of. But thank you all for having me. For those that don't know who I am, I'm Erin Griffith. I'm the Fedora Program Manager. And I'm here to just give a really brief update about the Fedora community, what we're up to, where you can find us, and how to get involved in our community. So really quickly here today, just a couple things. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. Yeah, this is our kind of known community as it stands right now. Fedora is a globally represented community of users. We have a lot of different types of installations at varying sizes of institutions around the world. And one of the things that we are trying to do is build up our kind of self-report registry on our new website. So the QR code that's on the slide here will take you to our registry. And so for us, this is just helping us build a more current and accurate database of who's using Fedora from around the world. So we'd appreciate it if you took a second and went and registered your instance there if you haven't already done so. Our technical support and contributions to the Fedora community, very much like Islandora, are done by our wonderful team of volunteer committers. They're the ones that are responding to community support requests. We're working through open issues, addressing current development work, things like that. And over the last year or more, we also have been working on finding more ways for people to get involved in the Fedora community that are less technically inclined. So you don't have to be a developer to be involved and to get involved in some of the projects that we have on the books. So that's just a really quick overview also of the current technology that exists for Fedora. So FC Repo Core, which is the main, we're on version 6.5.1 right now. And those are some of the other community developed tools that kind of go along with Fedora. So that's us. Fedora has its organizational home at Lyrasis, and this is kind of how our team operates, or the structure of the Fedora community in terms of people that are actively involved in doing development work, etc. So there's myself and Dan Field, who is the program developer for Fedora. So we are the only two paid individuals that work for the program, and we are responsible for maintaining, total program operations, communications, etc., and essentially making sure that everything is running as it's intended to, throughout. Our active committer team, these individuals here are the ones responsible for all of the heavy lifting at present in the Fedora community. So doing the majority of the development work, the support work, maintaining and updating the Fedora core. And then, of course, we are also always looking to add to that list of contributors, and we can expand to increase our skill set within this group and kind of diversify the individuals that we have contributing back to the technical side of Fedora. So this is kind of how our community is set up, a little bit different than the Islandora community. The community is really who we answer to if we want to say who we're taking our cues from, etc. But Fedora Governance Group is the group that helps establish kind of priorities and what we're going to do next within the community. And they're really the liaison. They're the link between the broader community and the program team, or the decision makers. So they're speaking on behalf of the community to help us establish what it is that we're going to focus our time and attention on. And they are the decision making group. So they're established. That group is made up of individuals from member institutions who are part of our Fedora membership program and financially support the program. But we also hold space within our governance group for community representatives. So these are individuals from non-member institutions, and we've done this so that there's equitable access to participating in this group for all members of the community. And then we also have some technical liaison seats that we hold so that, we can stay connected to the partner and sister communities that we operate with. And so this is kind of another snapshot of where we are today. So over the last few years, we've seen this really strong resurgence in the community for a variety of reasons, namely kind of migrations and people getting to more current and active modern versions of Fedora. Upwards of 18 months after Fedora 6 was released, we only had a handful of known users who were using Fedora 6 or considering migration to, and now we have well over 35 known institutions on this version or moving to it. and at least 6 institutions in the process of that migration that we are keeping track of, and they're keeping us informed about what's going on. But this move to my Fedora 6 is really what's driving the bulk of our engagement as of late. We've also welcomed 4 new members to the Fedora membership program, almost all of them coming from outside of North America, and along with this, 2 new members to our Fedora governance group, which is continuing to expand this international representation, which is what we're super grateful for. This is a brief snapshot of our Fedora community roadmap. So this kind of helps sets the priorities and track what we're doing at any one time. You'll notice that this is very tiny, and I apologize for that, but there are both technical and non-technical things on here, and that is intentional so that we can leverage different groups of people within the community working at the same time to accomplish different goals. And so we want the opportunity to be able to include as many people as possible, but also be able to do kind of productive work with as many folks as we can. And so this is, kind of that roadmap helps set the tone for what we're going to prioritize and what we're going to work on. This is a really high-level overview of some things that we've accomplished in the last year. I'm not going to go into them all in detail, but through using the roadmap to identify and define what priorities we are setting, we've been able to accomplish a lot of really great things and keep our work very focused without taxing the folks that are contributing and without kind of overstepping. We don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So I think these are really, really strong highlights to be proud of as we follow along our community roadmap. Current focus right now for technology, the technical team and the committer teams are working on a large-scale dependency upgrade project. Started in March. We're actually well ahead of our projected completion time, which is fantastic. A lot of that effort, I'm going to give a big shout out here to Jared Wicklow from the University of Manitoba for his massive contribution to getting us well over a major hurdle that we were looking at in terms of development here. But because of this, we're optimistically now anticipating being complete this work by the fall, which is phenomenal. And so at that point, we'll be moving into kind of a community testing and community involvement session based on the release that will come after all of this dependency work is done. And then we also are going to be moving on at the same time. We'll be going on to identify and prioritize what we do next in the community. So there'll be information coming out soon about how to get involved in these open community information gathering sessions to kind of help guide our next steps as a community. We also have Fedora Camp coming up, which is fantastic. This is our first in-person camp that we've held since pre-pandemic times. So we are graciously being hosted by the University of Vienna in the fall, and we look forward to getting together for those 3 days of in-person workshops, etc. This is some of our cross-community collaboration that we do, which is part of all staying connected. Fedora is not a standalone piece of software, obviously, so we need to remain connected to these communities that we work closely with, and this is kind of how we do that. And then this is what we have on the go for the rest of the year. So we're here, obviously, Fedora Camp. We'll be doing our virtual showcase later in the fall. And then our hope is to get to one more in-person conference potentially by the end of October. And then last but not least, obviously, Fedora community is sustained by its members. And so there are many ways to get involved, many ways to contribute and give back, much like, there is in the Islandora community. We're a community kind of operating in the same manner, and, we have the same requirements, but our members are really the way that we do this, and we're appreciative of contributions of all kinds. So just a big thank you to those. And then some resources for you all. So if you have any questions, these slides will be available, but more than happy to answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin. I think we're pretty good on schedule. Noah, are you ready to present?
Yep, I'm ready. Okay, so I'm here today on behalf of the Born Digital team to introduce Aurora, which is our new fully hosted Islandora offer. We designed Aurora to simplify collections management. Our ideal is to handle all of the software aspects of running a repository as a vendor, so that our clients can manage the content within the repository and not worry about the software. We designed Aurora to meet WCAG 2.2 AA accessibility standards, and the full stack is deployed on AWS for security and dependability. In addition to accessibility features, our base theme is mobile responsive, and can be rebranded to match each institution's style guide. We just launched the Boston College IR on Aurora a few weeks ago. Key features include support for all the standard Islandora content types, nested collections and compound objects, images, documents, books, newspapers, and other periodicals, as well as locally and remotely hosted audio and video. Out-of-the-box access control options include date embargoes, IP filtering for campus networks and reading rooms, and user and role-based object-level access restrictions. Of course, Aurora also supports the standard flexible relationships and automatic derivative generation that we associate with Islandora. As I mentioned, accessibility was a high concern for us, and we've openly shared our VPAT, which is linked from the slides here, which documents our WCAG 2.2 AA compliance. The discovery layer is powered by a full-featured faceted search interface with extracted text indexed for comprehensive full-text searches. We considered a number of IIIF compliant media viewers and ultimately chose Mirador because of its support for accessibility compliance. As you can see in this screenshot, we've utilized automatically extracted HOCR to enable search inside the object behavior for images and multi-page content. In addition, Aurora supports a broad range of image, audio, and video file formats. Remote video and audio capabilities allow inclusion of media hosted on most of the popular streaming services. Administrative tools allow for modification of branding and navigational elements, as well as integration with social media and search engine indexing tools. In addition to managing metadata and associated binaries, administrators can create and manage users, user roles, access restrictions, taxonomies, and controlled vocabularies. Bulk ingest and update capabilities are available via Islandora Workbench with data sourced in CSV sheets. Aurora provides out-of-the-box support for OAI PMH harvesting, SSO integrations, and popular metrics packages. Drupal offers the ability to create and expose additional APIs as needed. After the initial project, the monthly subscription fee covers hosting, expert support, and maintenance. We automatically back up all the data and monitor performance and uptime. We utilize AWS's web application firewall rules to mitigate the impact of AI bot harvesting activity. We deploy feature releases on a monthly basis, pulling in new features from the community as well as from our own product roadmap. If you're interested, please visit aurora.born-digital.com for more details, including transparent pricing. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. And then finally, I think, Aubrey, we're kicking it back to you to share update from Discovery Garden.
Yes, yeah. So Johnny Stevens couldn't be here today, but we do have Discovery Garden's presentation. Let me just get it pulled up for you. Okay, perfect. I don't think I shared with sound, which I'll just reshare just to be sure. Here we go. We'll do a sound check. If everyone could just give me a thumbs up, that would be great if you can hear it. Oh, I just gotta. Give me 1 second. I have to log in so that it will let me share with sound. Give me 1 moment. made me reconnect. That was exciting. Okay, we should be good to go now. Sorry about that,
Lost
folks.
me for a second.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was going to completely log me out when I hit login. So little confusing there. And of course, now it's not letting me share with sound. Here we go. Okay. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong thing. My goodness. This is just one of those joys of virtual conferences. Okay, we're seeing the right thing.
Yes, we're seeing
Hello,
the right thing.
everybody. My name is
You
Johnny
here?
Stevens, and I am here at IslandOraCon 2025 on behalf of Discovery Garden. I'm super excited to share some of what we've been working on over the last year, to discuss what we have coming up in the year ahead, and to share how you might get engaged, or how rather we might get engaged with you today, tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year, whenever works. So the last year has been amazing. We've done, if we think of our history, going back to 2010, we've done 200 plus lifetime installs of Islandora with 500 institutions supported. That's because of a lot of consortias, individual installs, and just work that we're very proud of doing. But 2025 has seen 31 ads for Islandora. So we've installed or directly supported 31 institutions installing Islandora. We have currently almost 300 ongoing support and maintenance clients. We've migrated content in a significant way. And so if we look back to 2022, we were doing roughly 5,000 objects a week. Now, maybe a nice stat, but nothing to write home about. Fast forward to 2024, with some innovations that the team has done, we're upwards of 1 million objects a week. That's something we're really proud of, and it actually helps the community migrate from legacy to modern, or migrate from some external source into Islandora. One of the things that we've been seeing over the last year is an increase in bots. That is traffic that goes to your site that brings you no value, gives you no good. They're not real people. They're just bots. They're AIs. And so using a tactic to move our sites behind a web application firewall, we've been able to decrease bot traffic in some cases up to 3,800%. This was done recently during a pre and post test analysis of bot traffic. That really means that getting the traffic to your site that is most important is something that we specialize in. We've also done some really good work from an innovation standpoint. So every Friday we have an innovation day where members of our staff are focused on developing a new feature or doing some kind of community development, or developing modules that could be deployed. We've logged 364 innovation days. That means those are people days, right? 364 people days of innovation in a year has meant some great features and benefits for our customers and for the community. We focused on gaining a SOC 2 audit, so we have a third-party audit done to make sure that our work is compliant with security measures. Another thing that we looked at this year is our average tenure. We've had 5 new staff come in 2025, but our long tenured staff have been here over 10, some 12, some 13 years. Our average staff tenure is 7 years, which is something we're really proud of. And then finally, on the support side, I mentioned those almost 300 clients that rely on us for their support. Well, our support team have cleared almost 1,800 tickets over the course of the last fiscal year. So just some stats to show, the volume and variety of what we have been focused on. And now some history. So going back to 2010, the Islandora framework was created. Discovery Garden was founded specifically to support the community through services and support, ongoing support. We've led a few really, interesting projects to upgrade, Drupal 6 to Drupal 7. And over the last number of years, we've done work that we're really proud of. But let's look forward. So those innovation days mean that we are focused on delivering a roadmap for our clients, supporting the community, focused on some innovative enterprise offerings, and just general excellence in services and hosting. So we're really optimistic about what the future holds for both Islandora and Discovery Garden, and we can't wait to share more as time goes on. I guess the last thing would be how you might engage. So we'd love to talk. A conversation costs nothing. We're big believers in the community. We always enjoy discussions, learning more about what you're working with in your collection, learning the history, and those are my favorite conversations to have. But 3 specific areas that you might consider engaging with us in. The first is bot protection and performance. If you've noticed a decline in performance, your system might be going down on a more frequent basis. You got a spike in traffic that you can't explain. Talk to us. It could be that you have been the target of bots, and so we have a few different tactics to employ. But one is to use AWS and the web application, the web application firewall. That's seen significant reductions for our clients. We have an on-premise plugin that we've been using to reasonable success to help clients who are focused or who are housed completely on-prem. And then we have hybrid options that we can explore as well. So reach out, be happy to connect you with my colleague Luke and his team to discuss more about bot protection and performance, support and maintenance. Maybe you have a legacy system, you have a legacy Islandora or a modern Islandora. Either way, we can support. We offer tier 2 and 3 support for Islandora 2. We offer support for clients who've yet to migrate out of legacy Islandora. And so happy to help you keep your system up and running and performant over the long term. And then for those of you looking for greenfield projects, let's build together. So we can develop greenfield projects using our DGI starter. So a starter Islandora that's pre-configured, it can be rapidly deployed. We have great migration tools, as I've said, migrating up to 1 million objects per week. And then any kind of custom development you might think through, we are happy to support and help on. So those are kind of the 3 categories. That's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful event. I can't wait to take in some of the sessions and hopefully to meet all of you later on. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Excellent. Thank you to everyone who gave an update in the session. So we have, I think, about 15 minutes for a Q&A. So if anyone would like to ask a question in person or in the chat, please feel free to do so.
And you can unmute yourself as well if you want to just ask your questions directly.
I can maybe get us
Question.
started with like a question,
Yeah.
unless someone's raised it. It's like a question for Yamil. It's like, I'm a documentation nerd, and I haven't lurked yet, although I'm interested in lurking now in the future. But what if you are a true novice to GitHub? How can how can people who don't know anything about GitHub kind of help out? Or will you teach us how to use GitHub?
One of my standard answers, I will teach you. I've presented at other conferences tutorials on how to submit a ticket and how to use Slack. So I got those 2 bases covered, but by now most people know Slack. And we should just delegate stuff. Like I sometimes, and a longer version of the presentation I gave, I'll say like, show up with a Google Doc. And we'll have to convert it to what's called Markdown, but it's pretty easy to learn. But the first time I'll do it for you, for lack of a better term, and let's get the show running. And while I'll do it, I'll show you how to do it. And I know someone like Rosie has tried to suggest a plugin you can basically add to Google Docs to change it to Markdown, but in my institution, I'm not allowed to use the plugin, so I have to do it, I guess, in my local account. So there's a few ways to go about it. And that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you for answering. So I might be joining on your groups now. There's a question chat. Ashley's also curious about, I think, the documentation, and because they use Confluence for documentation, the knowledge base. So I know there's a lot of different options out there. I've heard a lot of people talk about GitHub and Confluence.
Now, originally, the Islandora documentation was hosted on an instance of Confluence, and then we moved it to be at GitHub using the framework called Markdown. And if I remember correctly, the syntax of what Confluence uses and Markdown are very similar. So it should not be that surprising to do a transition. And in the past, we've realized there's some pluses to using a traditional wiki that may be easy for anyone to start editing, but there's some pluses from using this GitHub-based one. That's why I said, look, give me a Word document, give me a Google Doc, and we'll chip away and turn it into Markdown. And thanks, Jordan, for confirming, yeah, that the syntax is very similar for both of them. Now, one thing I didn't get a chance to mention because of the time limit is that one thing that Dig or soon DC tries to do with coordination with Aubrey as the community manager is to have what we call sprints, where we take a week or 2 weeks and we try to carve out time from our individual jobs and chip away at some particular documentation task. Even if you just write a paragraph in the whole sprint, we'll just cobble that all together and make something new or update something in particular. And I just didn't have a chance to cover that particular part of what we try to do. We haven't done a documentation sprint lately, and we almost try to do like a documentation focus sprint in this particular conference, but we're focusing on the what we were talking about earlier, the ECA transition from context to ECA. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to make a comment more so than anything is that the getting involved from a Fedora side of things, you know, the getting involved in technologies and whatnot that you're unfamiliar with or potentially intimidated by. We did, and I'm not saying that this is, you know, the way to go, but for what worked really well for us is we did a full documentation review of all of the Fedora 6 documentation, and we did it through, they weren't sprints, but they were we met every second week for 1 hour and we did live sessions. So I had taken all the documentation, dropped it all into active URLs, and it was an open spreadsheet. And we literally just, there was like a group of us that would come together for 1 hour every second week. And we live reviewed the documentation for exactly what you guys are looking to do with Dig. Is we were looking for grammatical errors, broken links, outdated, you know, spelling mistakes, things like that. And it was a really nice way for us to just bring non-technical folks together. You didn't need to necessarily know how to use the Confluence because we would give you access at the start of the working session for folks that were new. But then at the same time, the tech team and Dan and I were present to live answer questions as well. So we reviewed all of the Fedora 6 documentation, like every single URL, in under 6 months in this format. And it worked super well for us. It was, again, a pretty low barrier to entry. I mean, I think there was maybe some intimidation at going to that initial meeting, but then, you know, just being able to sit there for an hour and read through a thing, ask a question when you have it. It was a really nice way to bring folks together, and I think people really appreciated it. And I was surprised. Like I said, we did it in less than 6 months, and I was shocked that it took that little time. So it is possible, doable.
Yeah, and that's absolutely something that, you know, it's part of the plan that I'm working on to kind of coordinate with Dig, with DC, and try to do some of that kind of upkeep stuff for our documentation, as well as work on some documentation that helps newer folks kind of coming in. That's part of the working group that I'm looking to create around adoption. So we want to make it easier and less intimidating in general for people coming into the product, not only for being involved. So kind of getting two birds with one stone there, but that's absolutely part of the plan. And that's a great way to do it. It's a great suggestion, Erin. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts or
any of the presenters want to add more that maybe they couldn't fit in with their original presentation? Oh, there's a question for Noah in the chat. You mentioned role-based access control, which I had not thought was basically not a thing in the current island. How is Born Digital implementing that?
There is a groups-based access control, which is part of the general community code base. And that is what we're using. A few years ago, there were significant performance issues with it, but those have been resolved. So we are using it without significant performance issues on repositories with millions and millions of records. The Aurora is simply sort of a light version of our standard install. We do the standard install, we back off a little bit of administrative control, so it's a little harder to break your own site. And then we provide initial configuration and setup, and then hand over control to the client. There is also a totally do-it-yourself, just work with our knowledge base option, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for as well. But certainly the access control is one of the more complex pieces of it, that's for sure. I can dig up which modules we're using and post them in the chat.
I thought of one more thing if I can before. Sorry, I know there's like
Oh,
4
please
minutes
do.
left.
Yeah.
There was a comment in the chat from Rebel about how to get more from Fedora with Islandora 2.0, and I think it's a phenomenal topic and something of a lot of interest from both of our communities. And so one of the things I will just say is that on top of the registry that I mentioned in my presentation, kind of even just letting us know that you have an implementation of Fedora at your institution, we do this series of I have been posting this series of blog posts monthly on the Fedora website about different user stories, about different implementations of Fedora. And they don't have to be deeply Fedora-based conversations. I have a really simplified set of questions that I send anybody that's interested in participating. And then, we kind of answer them and we publish them to the blog, and it's a nice little series of implementation stories so that people can see and understand the different ways that Fedora is being used around the world with different front ends and whatnot. But one of the things I would love to see is more Islandora stories. I know a lot of times Fedora sits under the covers or under the hood, and people don't exactly know what's happening with it or how to best take advantage of it. But even if we can just start to chip away, even if we're telling the deeper Islandora story and just how it's connected to Fedora or that it's connected to Fedora, showcasing your collections, these are all for us ways of like kind of chipping away at that knowledge base and being able to share more broadly the stories. We did a really nice piece with Noah recently about how their clients or how they are implementing Fedora for their clients and their users, and kind of cross community and cross service provider collaboration. But if anybody's interested in kind of participating in one of those blog posts, I would love to hear from you. You can get a hold of me. I'll drop my email in the chat, but I'm also on Islandora Slack. But I would love to hear from you because I think telling this Islandora story will help get that information out into both of our communities about the best ways to optimize Fedora with Islandora, or how to take advantage of all the features of both pieces of software in your implementation. So would love to hear from anybody about that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Noah.
Yeah, Emil, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I dropped a link to a video I recorded about a year ago. It's generally about onboarding, and some of the organizational descriptions are a bit out of date with the changes we've made. But the link goes straight into my short 5-minute talk about how to create a GitHub account and learn how to submit a GitHub issue and search for issues, which is GitHub has become a standard way to receive feedback or be alerted of desires to add a new feature. So if you've been wondering how to learn a bit more about GitHub, watch that section of that video that is already timestamped.
I am going to go ahead and hand it over now to Mark Jordan for Islandora Workbench presentation.
Thanks, Aubrey. Can everybody see my slides? Perfect. And I assume sound is okay, since you're nodding to my question. Perfect. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I hope to, I'm looking forward to spending the next couple of days with everybody. This session is about a couple things. One is, because Noah has already alluded, kind of a current snapshot of the current state of Islandora Workbench. And I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on a technical level. It's more about the community. The second part is about my own kind of anxieties about the extent to which Workbench has been adopted by the community. I didn't think it would get so big and didn't think it would get so important. So a little freaked out by that. And third, and finally, it's about how we can, as a group, as a community of users, start thinking about how we can sustain Workbench in a more distributed, sustainable way in which the community has more input into how it works, how it's developed, how it's supported, and things of that nature. So that's the overall gist of what the presentation is about, but here's how it's broken down, more or less in that kind of order. At the end, I do have a slide. I do have a Google form that I'd like to have people here complete if they want. It's just a multiple choice question with 3 choices. I'll get to that at the end. So it's been 6 years, actually, not 5 years. If you look at this screen snapshot from the issue on the Islandora documentation GitHub repo, where I posted this suggestion about a desktop application to do content management, coming after the Islandora Camp EU in the June of 2019. This particular GitHub issue, even though I've only screenshotted the first couple of the first comment, it has 39 comments and 14 commenters, so it generated quite a bit of discussion at the time. And I will also point out that this was in June of 2019. We had an IslandoraCon in Vancouver, where I am, or in the region of Vancouver, the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, where I am, scheduled for October of 2019. And this is the session at that IslandoraCon where Seth Shaw, myself, and Minnie Rangel did a panel on different approaches to bulk ingesting content into Islandora. Islandora Workbench at that point was nothing more than a simple Python script, I think. Seth and Minnie demonstrated and talked about different approaches to doing that. As you will know, Workbench is not the only way to get content into Islandora or to update it at scale. The kind of the more standard, I would say, in the Drupal world anyway, approach is to use the Drupal migrate framework. Workbench provides an alternative to that, and I hope it kind of democratizes the ability to do that, because you can run Workbench from anywhere. You don't need access to the Drupal server's command line console, which you do need, generally speaking, to use the Drupal migrate framework. So that little blast from the past out of the way, move on to a current snapshot of Islandora Workbench. The Slack channel has over 190 members, which I think is a lot. The code base has 23 contributors, and I'll show a gallery shot of some of those contributors in a second. Since the GitHub repo was started in June of 2019, there have been an average of 3 issues per week created, many of them by me, not all by me, but many of them by me in response to conversations on Slack or other venues. And I think it's safe to say that a fairly large proportion of the content that is currently in Islandora 2 or Islandora Modern repositories has been ingested using Islandora Workbench. I know, for example, you have Foreign Digital using it extensively. You have people like Alan Stanley who do very large migrations in different contexts. and a whole bunch of other people who are shoveling content into their Islandora 2 repositories using Workbench. So it's become fairly embedded in the Islandora ecosystem and fairly embedded in the Islandora community, which is why I'm presenting this here today. This is a screen snapshot of the GitHub avatars that are shown on the Islandora Workbench GitHub repo. Of course, not everybody who has contributed to Workbench has their avatar there. And this is a list of people who are not represented visually in the avatar gallery. This is an interesting, the C. Klaus. I don't think this person is a member of the Islandora community. I think he's what you would call a flyby Python ninja, in the sense that he simply opened a GitHub issue to say, hey, you can make a really good improvement on your code if you do this. And I've never heard of this person. It just seems like he just dropped in and offered a hint to improve the Python code. And that was pretty cool, because it shows that Workbench is getting not just attention from within the community, but also it seems to be on the radar of people like this who just kind of drop by and say, hi, I found a little glitch in your code and here's how you can improve it. Kind of interesting. So as many of you know, I asked the community to complete a survey back at the beginning of June, and got 30 responses, not as many as I'd hoped, but it's a good sample, I think, of people who are interested enough in Workbench to spend 15 minutes to offer their opinion on some questions. And that survey had two purposes. One is to get a sense of priority for open issues in the Workbench GitHub repos issue queue. And these issues are mainly issues I curated myself, about new features and capabilities in Workbench, not so much bug fixes and things of that nature or support requests, but kind of either small or medium or large feature requests that I would like to get a sense of priority for. Some of them have been open for a long time. Some are fairly fresh at the time of the survey, but I thought it was time to kind of get a sense for what the community is looking for in terms of new features. Second purpose was to allow the community to offer some input in ways that were not represented simply by GitHub issues, specifically gaps in the tool itself. What is it doing that you want it to do that you may not have opened an issue to ask for? Gaps in the documentation, and I'm really interested in knowing what the organizational barriers to using GitHub are, because it's a command line tool, and that is that is not necessarily everybody's first choice when it comes to a kind of a Swiss Army knife for content management in Islandora. So I'm going to go through, I have 3 slides following this one that that offer my very shallow interpretation of the results of the survey. But I offer this as a key to the issues that are named in the survey, and also named by number, by GitHub issue number, on the slides, the charts that you'll see in a minute. So I might refer back to this if someone has a question or whatnot, but I have a summary here in my hand of that will aid me in my shallow interpretation of the results. So this is the first slide, shows a number of, sorts the questions by number of responses. The ones on the left got the most responses out of the 29 responses total. Ones on the right got the fewer responses, because responding to a given question was optional. The one on the far left is issue 751, 751, which is to provide a rollback on update tasks. And what this means is many of you have already probably used the rollback for create tasks in Workbench, so that if you run Workbench to load a bunch of content into your repository, you can fairly easily run a second command to, in effect, delete everything that you've created during the last session. Or you can modify the input file, the CSV that creates, to only delete certain ones. That's a rollback using kind of traditional database terminology. Issue 751 is about a rollback for update tasks. So this 751, it has not only received the most responses out of the 29 total responses offered during the survey, but you'll see in the next two slides, it's also probably the most important to those who have voted on it. GitHub issue 892 is add the ability to change name of a file that has already been uploaded to Islandora. So this would be a file that is on the public file system, for example, in Drupal, and you want to change the name that it was given by default during the ingest process. And the third most popular or most responded to question was issue 383. This is have Workbench check to see if it should be updated. Have Workbench automatically check to see if it's been updated. That particular issue has been resolved. I didn't announce it widely on Slack, but if you are using the most recent version of Workbench, it is checking to see if how many commits behind the tip of the main branch it is, and it will tell you so in the log. So I don't know if many of you have seen that, but that feature is there. You can turn it off if you don't want it to do that, but that one's already done. This next slide shows the questions sort of by combined number of 4 and 5 ratings. If you cast your memories back to the survey, it was a 5-star rating style survey, and I have interpreted what if a 4 and 5 to be like important and very important. And again, 751, that is the rollback on update tasks. That's got the most combined 4 and 5 ratings. 338, have Workbench check to see if it's needs to be updated. It has the second highest number of 4 and 5 combined ratings. And issue 897, this is has the third highest number of combined 4 and 5 ratings. Issue 897 is add the ability to create media from files that are already on the server. And as we speak, Alan Stanley has a couple of pull requests out to facilitate that feature. This final slide I'll share shows the average ratings sorted highest to lowest. Again, 751 is the leader here. 338 is the next, and 897. I think because we only are working with 29 responses, these figures are obviously maybe not, they're maybe skewed a little bit because of the small sample size. And I didn't intend for this to be, statistically representative or what have you, but more to provide kind of a yardstick or just a kind of a general sense for importance. But there you have it. Kind of more interesting to me in the survey were the open questions. There were 3, and I'll go over the responses to those 3 questions here, or selective responses. These are not comprehensive or complete responses, but I chose ones to show here that I thought would be of interest to the community, and I hope to generate some conversation after this presentation. And where you see quotation marks, these are copied verbatim from the responses. Where you don't see quotation marks, I've kind of summarized a little bit or cleaned up the wording to fit it on the slide. So the first open question was, what are some Workbench features, capabilities that you or your organization would find useful that are not identified in other questions in this survey? And the first one I'll go through here is there at the top of the list. It would be very useful to be able to make global changes to all nodes associated with a given taxonomy term, something like a global find and replace. This is an interesting feature, also very dangerous, as you might expect or might suspect. But you can already do this if you want to piece together a couple of different Workbench tasks and kind of get a CSV from Drupal, do something with that CSV, do something with metadata, and then replace the metadata. This is kind of an approach that I just described that Rosie Lefebvre has taken in the round tripping of metadata. And in their famous example, there's a video that shows this. Rosie separates out the publisher field from the linked, from the linked agent field and converts it into a plain text field and separates that out, and puts back the fixed up metadata back into the source field. You can do that now with, again, a couple of steps. I would be very interested in whoever shared this idea to either flesh it out. If you want to flesh it out with me directly in private, I'm happy to do that. Or if you want to create an issue on the GitHub repo and posit some use cases, and more particularly, how you see the user do, like, what is the user's journey through this task? If it is not to separate out the sort of 3 or 4 steps that you could do now to achieve this goal, how do you see yourself interacting with Workbench to achieve this end? I'd be very interested to hear that, because it's would be a very useful thing to be able to do. Again, I said potentially dangerous because I think it is. This is the kind of thing where, a little error can lead to catastrophic additional problems with your metadata. So I think we need to build in some careful guardrails there, some thoughtful guardrails to make sure that if you're going to apply a large scale change to your repository, that you kind of know how to, you're in control of all the steps. Being able to merge taxonomy terms is also very interesting. This is something that we do here at SFU, not using Workbench, but using the term merge, I think it's called, module, contrib module in directly in Drupal. But it is certainly a task that I think a lot of sites want to do, particularly if you're migrating from legacy Islandora or other sources where your vocabularies are probably not as polished and refined and as perfect as you would want them to be. So I'm also very interested to hear how a user would step through this task. Again, you can do this now, I think, with Islandora Workbench, but you need to break down the various steps in that task and run Workbench a couple of times to achieve that goal. If this is intended to be a one execution task, then I would be very interested to hear how you envision walking through that. Reading and writing bags. So if you've been around the Islandora community very long, you know that bags are near and dear to my heart. I, at the same time, so I'm really interested in this idea. At the same time, I'm fairly strict and dogmatic about not having Workbench expand the kinds of input that it takes, only because I fear that it will become so complex if we start expanding it from reading CSV into reading, JSON or what have you natively, that is to say, without some kind of a conversion step or stage there to get it into CSV. I just want to be cautious about that scope creep in Islandora Workbench. But to be able to read and write bags is something that is totally possible to do, again, if you break down that large task into various steps. And one of the things that I have introduced into Workbench recently that may have gone under many people's radars because you may not have seen a direct use case for it or an obvious use case is the ability for Workbench to run a script or multiple scripts on a list of node IDs or term IDs or media IDs. And this is useful because it is not a feature in itself necessarily, but more like a way of enabling new uses of Workbench, right? So I think in my post to the Islandora Workbench Slack, I said, I hope that this will get people thinking about contributing their own scripts that they use, so that we can establish a little gallery or repository of things you can do with Workbench if you have a list of IDs that you can run that against. So for example, to use reading and writing bags as an example, if you want to write bags using Workbench, someone could write a script to create a bag based on one node ID. And that script can then be registered with Workbench, and then you can use Workbench to iterate through a list of those IDs and create the bag for each one in the list. That's kind of the purpose of this new feature. Yeah, so I think this is this is certainly an area in Workbench where we're going to see a lot of activity and a lot of flexibility that is using it as a way of applying external processes to the content in our repositories. And in many cases, it will be overkill and unnecessary. I can already anticipate some of you saying that, and that's a fair criticism. But at the same time, Workbench is pretty good at iterating through a list of IDs and letting you filter them out and trying things and testing things and whatnot. And it does let you write a script that is focused on one thing only, as opposed to handling, reading CSV, which is kind of plumbing. So I invite the community to start thinking about how we can use this new feature and to start thinking about how we can all share each other's scripts so that we can build up some capacity there and some diversify the functionality of Workbench in that way. Next feature I want to comment on is in a create task, add data to fields on media items. This is something we can absolutely do with a little bit of work. Adding media to nodes at the time of creation of the nodes is one of the more complex kind of subsystems within Islandora Workbench. And I think maybe not as architected in as a good of a way, or it's maybe not architected as well as it could have been from if we had done it a different way. So if this is important to people, we can do it. I think that, and I welcome a GitHub issue on this feature. I think one of the limitations of Workbench and one of the hardest things to get your head around is how do you put complex and hierarchical and structured information into a CSV file without getting too crazy with the syntax of the CSV data itself. So by that I mean, right now, if in a create task, in general, the columns in the CSV are all about the metadata fields on the content type that your nodes are going to end up being. With some allowance for things like the file that you're adding or additional files you're adding and things of that nature. If we implement this, we're going to be combining in one job CSV with that describes the field that populates fields in the nodes and CSV that populates fields in the media. So that might get a bit complex. I think one of the built-in features that is there already in Workbench that we could use this for is the idea of the secondary task. So you can kind of chain Workbench tasks together, and it will just run all of those chained together tasks, but share the information that has been created during the initial task. So in this case, you have if you run a create task, it will create nodes. They're going to have node IDs in your Drupal, and that could be used to in various ways. And we can do the same sort of thing potentially with adding field data to media. In this case, the primary task would be your node creation task, and the secondary task would be create media with the separate CSV. Just an idea that we can explore if it's important. And the last one, not exiting on the first error during check. This is an annoyance for sure. I get that. It is possible now to tell Workbench to not do that on maybe half a dozen or something like that checks. And it's called the option or the setting is called perform soft checks. Something that I think Born Digital introduced. And we can expand that definitely so that you can tell Workbench to be more forgiving. That's pretty easy to do. So please voice your support for that particular feature. Question number 2, what are the biggest pain points, obstacles for you and your organization when using Islandora Workbench? First one is lack of support for specific Drupal field types. And that's kind of a necessary evil in the sense that each field type, and this would typically be a field type that is not usually are often used within this kind of standard Islandora setup, or a field type introduced by a contrib module. The reason that the Workbench cannot auto-magically support all field types without some kind of prior work to register those field types is because Islandora Workbench validates CSV data, and it also needs to be very specific in its communications with Drupal about what CSV data goes where, because Drupal is very unforgiving about that. So Workbench needs to kind of manage that relationship a little bit in a strict way. Now, that said, I think that it is possible to create kind of developer tools for Workbench that let developers easily generate new code to support new field types. I'm pretty sure that's possible. So that would mean that it wouldn't be a big deal at all to introduce a new field type into Islandora Workbench, because it will be easy to generate the code necessary to handle the new field type, and it won't take some developer, a week to create that code manually or however they create it. So I think that's something we should look at to mitigate this particular hurdle. The second one, it's slow. Yeah, it is slow. And I apologize for that. When I hear DJI talk about ingesting 1 million objects in a week, I just kind of go, yeah, I'm never going to own a Ferrari. I'm never going to own a Ferrari. I'm only ever going to own a Kia or a, whatever. So Islandora Workbench is slow because of the way that it communicates with Drupal. And I know some people have run, multiple instances of Workbench against the same Islandora repository, and that's going to work until it doesn't work, because the bottleneck there is, and the bottleneck in any case with Workbench is not Workbench, it is Drupal. And if you can scale your Islandora stack sufficiently that you can run multiple instances of Workbench against it at the same time, then you're going to achieve a lot faster ingests. But there's very little we can do. There are some things we can do, but very little we can do. Those things are very short. It's a short list to make Workbench any faster than it already is. There is on the website, on the documentation website, there is a fairly comprehensive list of things you can try that may work for you to make it faster. And in many cases, those do get you appreciable gains, but I don't think we're ever going to make Workbench be able to ingest 1 million things in a week. I just would like to see it happen. I don't think it's going to happen. So it's slow. Silent modifications of input data. This is happening. It's a bug, and I would love to see examples of where it's happening, where it changes the input data and doesn't log the fact that it did so. The only case I think it does this, and if this is not the case, there's a bug we need to fix. That is, if you have, so fields in Drupal have this idea of cardinality, that is the maximum number, and maybe even the minimum number, but certainly the maximum number of values they can have. So think about repeating values in a field. Drupal is extremely strict about this. If you try to give it one more than a field value than the field is configured to take, it just says forget it, not going to do that. So Workbench will, if you add more values to a CSV column than the field that column corresponds to, it will only take the first 3 or the first whatever, depending on the configuration of the field. And Workbench can determine the configuration of the field for you automatically. But if it does that, it should log that. And if it doesn't, that's a bug, and I would love to hear about it so we can fix it. Frustration with having to prepare CSV data for input. Yeah, it is frustrating, and I kind of apologize in advance for the kind of obscure and arcane nature of some of the syntax in Islandora Workbench CSVs. I would love to have better tools for generating that for us, but CSV is kind of where it's at for the time being. Same with YAML. And I think if there's one usability fix that we could introduce into the Workbench ecosystem, it is a configuration file wizard or generator. I admit that the syntax within the YAML configuration files is as arcane as the syntax within the CSV columns. But there's almost 200 configuration settings and in Workbench currently. And yeah, it's a little bit challenging sometimes to get the right configuration file. I recommend, and this is something we do at SFU, and I'm sure that others do it as well, is establish a template YAML configuration file for the kinds of jobs that you're likely to do, and just be careful about how you customize them for a given task to save yourself the grief of managing the configuration files, because they are a little bit challenging. Check process functionality needs to be truly comprehensive to be useful. If it is not comprehensive, open an issue and we'll make it comprehensive. It is intended to be comprehensive. Check is intended to ensure or at least get you to success on the task. So if check is not doing it for you, please open as many issues as you need to so we can make it better. This next one is interesting, and I want to acknowledge Jared Wecklow's current work on cracking this nut. Jared has a couple of pull requests out now to define a new Islandora Workbench permission, which will mean that you will not have to use credentials for an admin level user in your Workbench configuration files. I haven't tested Jared's solution yet. It looks really good, and I'm looking forward to testing it. So this one may become reality in the very short time. And the last one is a big one as well, and one that goes all the way back to the early days of Workbench. Challenges and inconvenience of using a Python command line application as opposed to a desktop application, I think, is the implication here, or at least one that is integrated more tightly with Workbench. I'm not against this changing this, but I feel that it is important that Workbench remains, not necessarily remains exclusively, but that you can always use it as a command line tool. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a desktop application or some other tighter integrations with the Drupal website. But the reason that it's a command line tool is that that is the most flexible kind of tool. I acknowledge that not all users are comfortable using it, that it takes a little bit of practice and confidence to get up to speed. But I created Workbench not necessarily as a tool that end users would actually use directly. I created it as a way to automate getting stuff into Islandora as well. And the command line capabilities are an important part of that goal. If the community doesn't think that's an important goal going forward, that's fine. I'm happy to have a conversation about that. But we can have all three, right? We can have a command line application, we can have a desktop application, and we can have tighter integration into the website. The latter two are going to require a lot of work. And I've been putting my time into the command line tool. But I would be happy and look forward to having conversations about how we can change that. Question number 3, how would you improve the Islandora Workbench documentation? These are all great suggestions, and I fully acknowledge the documentation is a beast. It's intimidating. I do my best to keep it up to date, and I really welcome collaboration on that task. So any suggestions you have to make it better, I'm totally happy to talk about them. Yeah, I'm not going to go through these in the interest of time, but yes, these are all great ideas. And if anyone has any ideas on how to indicate, like this one at the bottom, maybe there's a way to streamline the docs or gather the most used or search issues and quick tips or top tips. We could either curate a section of that, or we could use some kind of data generated by searches or what have you, or analytics on the website or whatnot to figure that out. But yeah, I totally acknowledge that the documentation is big, complex, nerdy, and I'm happy to fix those problems if they're problems for you. That said, it's because the document, I want to say one thing, the documentation is big and complex and nerdy because it reflects, I think, pretty accurately the complexity of Workbench. So I'll just move on to the challenges section here to kind of share some of those challenges and why it's so complex. And this is a little bit of a confessional part for me because I am the chief maintainer and product owner of Workbench. And even though there's a thriving and very enthusiastic and super awesome community of collaborators and contributors just in Workbench alone, and that reflects the whole community in Islandora in general, but there's a certain core in Workbench that are helping maintain it. Some of these things in this list are a little bit selfish and from my own personal perspective. And I'm sharing them with you because I want to make sure that, as Noah said at the beginning of today, I intend to transfer Workbench to the foundation. I want to see a better way of supporting and sustaining Workbench, better than just having one person be the chief maintainer, because I simply don't have the capacity to do as good a job as I think Workbench deserves. And this is because when back in 2019, when I first started thinking about, how do we use take advantage of Drupal's REST interfaces to allow people to manage content in ways that are where they are, like their desktop computer or their their laptop or what have you, not having to log into the Drupal console, server console. During that year, I started a new job that took me away from being from development. Like software development is not part of my current job description, hasn't been since 2019. And for the most part, I work on Workbench coding and testing and vetting pull requests and whatnot outside of normal business hours. So I do respond to Slack channels, and I do open and respond in many cases to GitHub issues during office hours, but almost all the coding and testing and whatnot is done outside of normal office hours. I simply don't have the capacity to, I think, devote as much time to Workbench as it deserves. I suffer severely from something I call local priority bias, which means I have unilaterally made an issue jump the queue in terms of my fixing of the issue or introduction of a feature because SFU needed it at the expense of someone out in the community who should be really next in the queue. And I apologize for that sincerely, but that's just the way it is sometimes with open source software, I guess. And I'm as guilty as anyone of local priority bias in this case. That's not fair and that's not good. So I want Workbench to be managed and curated by the community in a way that doesn't happen as often as it does today. This is a big one. And those of you I've worked with to help resolve an issue will maybe sense my frustration when I'm not able to figure out why Workbench is doing something for you that I can't replicate. And that is because it is extremely difficult in many cases to replicate your computing environment, not only in terms of which operating system do you use, because thankfully Workbench is a little bit agnostic. I mean, it does a pretty good job of not caring if you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Maybe a few instances of where that's not the case, but in general, it's not too bad, provided you can get over the hump of having to use the command line, right? That's the big hump for people. But it's still difficult to make sure that I am testing Workbench using the same kind of CSV that you're using, even if you share it with me, because then I need to set up Islandora on my, I'll look at the Isle, like a starter site on my laptop to test this, that has the same field configuration that your Islandora does. And that's often challenging as well. So this is just, I think, one area where I find it challenging to help people because it is difficult to replicate your environment. And I think that as a community, we should be looking for ways that people who are supporting Workbench to help people who are supporting Workbench mitigate this, so that there are ways to, dump configurations or dump field configurations in Drupal and whatnot that let people reconstruct that environment easily to get to the heart of the problem that we're trying to fix. This one, lack of easy access to input data, and particularly remote files. This is a challenging one. Many users of Workbench use URLs in their file column in their CSV and point to a file sitting somewhere, usually on usually a data stream endpoint in a legacy Islandora, but not always. And sometimes those files are hard for them to share with me because they're working in a migration environment that's relatively pinned down, and that outsiders like myself can't really gain access to easily. Again, here, I think there are ways of mitigating this for people who support Islandora Workbench, and I would be interested in having conversations about how we can do that. Workbench's complexity. Workbench is horribly complex. It has grown since 2019 organically, meaning that people ask for features, they get introduced, but they get introduced in ways that don't necessarily conform with best practices for writing a relatively complex Python application. So there's that. There's the fact that there are almost 200 configuration settings, which often stomp on each other. That's also a big challenge. In addition to the 18,000 lines of application code, we have about 12,000 lines of test code. And I have to say, this is automated test code where you run scripted tests against Islandora. I have to say that I would like to see the lines of test code be way higher than the lines of application code. There are whole parts of Islandora Workbench that are not subject to integration tests, for example, where we run tests that have Islandora Workbench running against an actually live, like a hot Islandora, whether it's on your laptop or in the GitHub environment. So it's complex, and that's super challenging. As the maintainer, I can vouch that there are certain functionalities that are consistent across tasks. So for example, we focused on nodes initially, then media, then terms, and you can do lots of things with nodes. You can do many of those things with media, and you can do a small subset of those things with taxonomy terms. So really, we want to have uniform functionality across, or where it's appropriate, functionality across all the major entity types that Islandora Workbench can handle: nodes, media, and taxonomy terms. Some suggestions for the next 5 years, and this is my advice to the Islandora community. I'm not leaving. I just want to make sure that I'm not the only maintainer going forward in the near future. I think we need to figure out a way to share the maintainer role with other people in a way that it doesn't hold Islandora Workbench back, but at the same time kind of gets it out of this local feature bias or local priority bias that I talked about a few slides ago. Part of that shared maintenance should be a way for an easy way for people who have signed up to work on Workbench to get like claim a ticket in GitHub. That's kind of normal part of distributed maintenance of open source software. Nothing special or specific to Workbench, but we don't have that at the moment. At best, I will ask someone if I know they have a lot of experience with a particular subsystem or part of the Islandora Workbench code, if they can take a look. But that's me pinging someone that I think may be able to help. I talked at length about the challenge of developing users' environments in order to narrow down the problem and be able to replicate the problem. And then if you can narrow it down, replicate it, you can fix it. It's as simple as that. I think we need to talk about ways of dumping or at least inspecting environments such that that people who are helping support and fix Workbench don't have to spend a lot of time scaffolding up a whole bunch of complex field configurations and things of that nature, just to be able to replicate the problem so that they can then therefore fix it. And Noah has already mentioned that this is happening amongst the Islandora leadership. Create a working, in this case, it's a working group to guide Workbench maintenance. I really feel strongly that Workbench has a lot more potential than it currently demonstrates. Even though the user community is active and asks all kinds of awesome questions and is really helpful, willing to step in and help, I would like to see it managed in a more a broader, more diverse, and more representative way than it currently is. And to conclude my presentation, I want to talk about what I think has been maybe a sore point amongst the community, even though or at least a sensitivity amongst the community, even though it didn't come up in that question that I asked on the survey. And that is a shift from what are called rolling releases, where there's never really a release of Islandora Workbench. It's just like whenever Mark or whoever else updates the code. And then you have to, as a user, do a git pull to something more structured and standardized, something called point releases. And what I want to do here is I have a little survey that I want people to respond to. We can take 5 minutes so you can think about your response before you submit it. But I want to know which of these types of release styles or types you would like to see Workbench conform to. So currently, as I said, we have rolling releases where basically, every few days really, or every few weeks at most, but usually every few days, the Workbench code changes somehow. A bug is fixed, a new feature is introduced, something changes. That's a rolling release. It's up to you to go in and do a git pull in your GitHub, in your Islandora Workbench directory. Again, as I said, Workbench will now, unless you turn it off, tell you if your version of Workbench is a few commits behind the head or the tip of the main branch, like the most recent version of Workbench. Or if it's more than 10 commits behind, it will tell you you're more than 10 behind. But that's only there to nag you into updating Workbench. It's not really a great way to do it. The other two styles of releases are a point release, where the code evolves, features evolve, and someone decides, okay, now it's time for a new release, either a minor or a major release. And that's packaged up in a standardized way as a release, and then announced with changelog and all that. Or the other alternative is a time-based release where, because it is a highly fluid code base and changing all the time, we might say, okay, every 2 months, we're going to cut a new minor release, and whatever features and bug fixes get into those releases at a certain window within that 2-month period, those are going to be in that release. And then that repeats itself every 2 months in this example. So give me a second while I share the I've just shared the link to the Google form that has a single 3-option multiple choice question over which to indicate which style of release you think you would like to see, or your institution. And again, here I welcome responses from more than one person at a institution, but I ask that each individual only respond once. And we won't, I don't think, go through the results during this presentation. I'd like to leave the last 10 minutes for questions if you have any, but I will certainly share the results of this little ad hoc survey and ensure that whatever happens in the next few months with regard to the new Islandora Workbench working group, that information is shared with that group, so we can discuss these options with these options and put out a proposal to the community. So I'll just let you have 5 minutes or so to think about that question and to vote. And I think, Aubrey, we can have 5 minutes for questions at the end if people want.
I was muted. If anyone has questions, thoughts, comments on any of this, feel free to type in the chat, or you can unmute, as I mentioned before, and you're welcome to talk directly to Mark. Noah.
More of a comment than a question. But Mark, you're extraordinarily hard on yourself. That you've done really heroic work, and we're all really, really appreciative of it. Your service level is outstanding. Not to take away anything you said.
Thank you. I guess I'm just channeling my kind of I think Workbench can be better, and I mean I've been around, I mean, as you know, I've been around open source a long time, and you can kind of see patterns, right, in management of these important applications, and I think Workbench is one of them. I do really want us to think about how we can spread that out, because I really enjoy working on Workbench at the cost of all the other things that I've created over the years for Islandora. I decided to focus on Workbench because there's a real need for it.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, we've started this hosted platform, and one of the objectives of the hosted platform is not to have clients going on servers. And so this question of can you run Workbench from a GUI is actually top of mind for us.
Yeah.
And we're thinking about could we build a little interface that's part of the Workbench integration module, for example, that would just give a GUI, upload a CSV, input, output for configuration options and log messages. Can we make it happen all within the browser? So I think we're all in on helping out with this new Workbench working group to make that happen, and we would welcome collaboration from other people who are interested in that feature as well.
Super, really super. I really think, like there's lots of options for making using Workbench easier in a variety of GUI contexts, and what you're describing there sounds really awesome. Manish, I think you're the only person with your hand up.
Yeah, in the GUI, if it's the error source exactly there, it will be very helpful as soon as upload USB, and if some error is there, it's pop up there. So
yeah, I totally agree. I think Workbench is I think we always thought that we would have a GUI. It's just that it never happened, and totally look forward to the day when we have something like that helps it helps people use it more easily. And also like I really am happy to see the different ways that people are using Workbench, and if we can like different, we could have multiple GUIs if we wanted to. I mean, that's a big investment, right, in terms of capacity. But like I know, for example, Joe Coral's doing a bunch of interesting stuff with using GitHub to integrate it. We've used it in our own migration to do some interesting automations and things like that. So the more ways we can use it, the better. Right. Any other questions? looking at the chat, all kinds of interesting things coming up. Super. Yeah.
Coming back to the working group, this was a thing in early Islandora 2.0 was there were 5 different ways to do any given thing. And part of the objective of having a working group, I think, is to get all these people with all these ideas together and say, okay, which one or maybe 1.5 of these are we really all gonna get behind and work on together?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we have so much energy and capability. I won't say capacity because I use that in a specific way, but we have so much energy and good ideas and energetic people in the community that just always amazed at what we can make Islandora do. And I'm hoping we can figure out ways to channel more of that into Workbench where appropriate.
Great. All right. So my notes up. Sorry, real quick. All right. I'm going to be really quick, and I expect a bunch of questions. So I'm a really short presentation, and at the end of it, I do actually have a link to way more extensive notes. So if you don't want to take notes, that's fine. You're not going to need them. But I'm Don Richards. I'm from Johns Hopkins University. Today, I'm going to share how we tamed bots and crawlers, and that we're hammering our repository sites using Cloudflare to manage the load and protect our servers. But yeah, there's a more comprehensive, so I'm going to skirt through it, but there's a more comprehensive breakdown in the presentation notes, pretty thorough, so you can actually use that mostly to set up Cloudflare for your Islandora instance, possibly. It's hard to run it off of memory, and that's what I did this presentation, those notes from. So we wanted to regain control of our repository, protect it from unwanted bot traffic, so we could focus on serving researchers, students, and faculty, so less noise and more meaningful use of our collections. Practically overnight, we saw a jump in the type of traffic. I think everybody saw it as well. It's like and it brought our servers down at higher and higher frequencies. The main culprit for us, or at least the one that sparked action initially, was Perplexity. Officially, they suggested that we just add their robots, add them to the robots.txt file if we don't want them to crawl our site. But then they actually have a pretty lengthy history of just ignoring the robots.txt file, so that was going to be useless effort. So how we ended up taming the bots is, first we started auditing our traffic, as you should, digging into logs and analytics to see what's actually hitting your site, and then identifying problem bots, finding crawlers that were aggressively targeting your repository. A good example of this is, like, especially when they love your search pages, and more specifically the facets, and they can get quite crazy with the facets. So just that alone will bring one bot could bring down your site pretty quickly if it's aggressive enough, or at least that's what we were seeing. So we set up Cloudflare through our university's existing account, using what's called a partial CNAME to proxy just our repository's URLs. This turned out to be a really simple turnkey solution. We turned on security rules, enabling rate limits, WAF, or it's the firewall. I forgot the acronym because I'm talking to too many people at once. and bot protection. At first, maybe a little too aggressive though, which we'll come back to. But finally, we monitored and refined by watching bandwidth and access patterns, tweaking settings, and ultimately reducing Amazon cost or AWS cost. But this is an ongoing effort. We had such a dramatic reaction to turning on Cloudflare on most of our servers that we actually were surprised at how silent our servers got, and we thought we had crashed them. So it took a little bit of investigation to make sure we weren't just seeing on campus is one thing, but off campus we were afraid that people weren't seeing it, but we were. The end results were, we cut down dramatically on bot noise. Our traffic stabilized, our repository became much more responsive, and we saw real savings on bandwidth and egress charges. Now, I'm not involved in the financial side of things, so it's more or less me just kind of speculating. On the dashboard, like you see here, it does show you how much they've actually blocked, how much bandwidth you've saved. in, you know, a 7-day period or a month period. I think the smaller, the circle on the right is a full month for one of our instances, and the one on the left, I think, was more. I think that was a full 7 days. Yeah. So just to give some insight, these snapshots from our Cloudflare web application firewall. There we go. There's the acronym, or WAF. Because we are blocking or challenging the huge bulk of non-human traffic, we are actually now considering reducing the specs on some of our servers, pulling back on RAM and CPU, because we simply just don't need as much power to handle the fake traffic anymore. Of course, it wasn't perfectly smooth. We turned on too much at once, which seemed like a smart idea at first, but legitimate users got blocked. Students and faculty started hitting the challenge pages. We got a lot of Cloudflare CAPTCHA headaches. So we tweaked rules multiple times, learning to dial it back. And now we know to monitor gently and tighten only when necessary. Looking back, though, it was worth the adjustments. We're serving people, not bots. Costs are down, systems are stable, and staff time isn't wasted chasing down false alarms. So here are some practical things that your library can do. Start with auditing your traffic. Actually look at your logs and see who's hitting your servers. Start small, begin with mild rules, and don't just start hitting all the green check boxes. I think we did. I say that, we didn't hit them all, but we're a little too aggressive with them. Leveraging existing tools, like if your institution's like ours and happens to have a license for Cloudflare, it might be good to just ask politely. Something else to note is that Cloudflare does offer a free tier, and we probably would have only needed the free tier if we didn't already have a site license. So, and then most important, monitor and adapt. Bots are clever. They'll change tactics frequently, so you need to adjust to. Something to keep that in mind. When it comes to Islandora specific changes out of the box, we didn't need to do anything. Like we switched DNSs, and once that, I think took, they say it could take up to 48 hours. I think at least the official documentation says that. I think within an hour, our first DNS moved over without a problem. But there are a few things that would be smart, or turned out to be smart, to change over. So we told our servers to trust the Cloudflare IPs for their proxy. If this is all part of their instructions. Explicitly bypass caching for a search to avoid stale facets. And if you want to do your API endpoints, that's that any API endpoint that might be dynamic that you don't want cached. Make sure your analytics and geostats read correctly information from the reads correctly the information from the X forward 4. Definitely a more technical comment. It's definitely well documented in their site. So and the document that I gave definitely references it, so you can look more into it. And then run your curl test to confirm that the logs are showing the correct client IP. Otherwise, everything looks like it's coming from Cloudflare. So that was super quick, ran straight through it. So does anybody have any questions? I know I talk quick, really quick. Oh yeah, I meant to hit send whenever I started this. All right, it's in the Slack, IslandoraCon 2025 thing. So the link to this slide as well as the document.
We'll also have all of the slides available post-conference too. So.
And I turned on commenting on that. So if anybody has any questions or something, if I can, I'll answer them. No, we didn't. We probably should have to answer Noah's question if we tried any non-Cloudflare. We just knew that we had Cloudflare as an option from our institution, so we just rolled with it when the problem came up. But there are other options out there. There's a few open source ones as well. I think I know what you're asking. We do have everything that is admin based URLs bypassing Cloudflare, and we also have a filter set up so you have to be behind our firewall to get to them. I don't know if that answers it. I do go into a little bit of detail about the subdomain stuff in the document, so that might help. To be honest, I wasn't the primary. I didn't set up the full things. I just gave feedback. We have an operations team that did the bulk of the work because they'd already done it for other systems. To answer Gene's question, it's like, yes, we did have excessive traffic. Singapore, I think, was one of the big ones for a while. It depended on the day, but we would see from time to time repeats. But they were kind of all over the place, and it did not make any sense for consistency for prior traffic to the bots. We did not try the traffic plugin. That'd have been interesting to try. We were trying to stay consistent from all of our systems since we have 3 different repository systems. So DSpace, Dataverse, and Islandora. And a 4th one, a portal, Vireo, for ETD submission. So like we wanted to make sure all of our systems had a consistent setup. We didn't run into any search problems initially, but it was a concern that we might have been caching our searches. So we just added the ignore cache parameter for anything that's / search for the Islandora domain. Oh, thanks, so. Other questions I can help with? Not, you guys can always add them to the document or hit me on Slack at any time. I will talk your ear off, so I don't mind talking about whatever. And at the end of the presentation here is also the URL for the document.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Don. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if folks do have other questions too, we might have time at the end of this session as well to kind of come back and revisit things if folks want to. But with that said, do we have our friends from Catalyst here? Jonathan Hunt.
Yep, I'll see if I can share my screen.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us so early in New
Well,
Zealand.
it's 8 o'clock now, so
Yeah.
I did get up and caught Mark Jordan's talk, so I couldn't go earlier, sorry.
No, it's perfect. That's what the recording's for.
Can people see that front slide there? Okay. So Chris Burgess and myself are going to talk about Islandora observability, and we'll share this link to our slides. through Slack as well. So let me just, okay, it's taking a while to make the transition. All right, so we'll introduce ourselves and the company we work for, Catalyst. We'll talk about some of the challenges we've run into with respect to understanding the behavior of Islandora, because Islandora is quite a complex system. We'll talk about what is observability and give a real world example where we diagnose a performance problem using an external tool. But we've since discovered OpenTelemetry and Grafana, and we're getting more involved in those components. So we'll describe what we're doing there and then share some resources for people who might be interested in that. So I guess I do have a kind of question for the audience. If people want to mention their level of knowledge around observability, it'd be kind of good to know where people are at. We're certainly beginning our journey. So we're not claiming to be observability experts, but I think from all the reading I've done and the notes that I've, the programs and applications that we've been trying, I think observability is highly relevant to Islandora, and I'd really like to see the community kind of embrace it wholeheartedly. So let's get into some details. First, a little bit about us. For my part, my name's Jonathan Hunt. I'm in Otatahi, Christchurch in the South Island of New Zealand. I've been working with Drupal for almost 20 years. I know whenever 4.6 came out, and working with Islandora specifically over the last, 6 or 7 years, starting with Islandora 7. I've been working most recently with Simon Fraser University, so shout out to them for allowing us to share some of the work that we've been doing against their system when it comes to observability. Chris, do you want to unmute and just introduce yourself?
Yeah, kia ora. I'm Chris. I'm based a little further south than Jonathan in Otapoti. Been working with Drupal for a long time, and really enjoy working with Islandora as well. Thanks, Jonathan, for dragging me into it.
Thanks, Chris. So we've got a slide up there about Catalyst. So Catalyst has been operating for, I think, 25 years now. We're an open source technology company, so all the solutions we build for customers are based on open source platforms. And obviously one of those is Drupal, and then since we got into Drupal, we got into Islandora as well. And I think we have a claim to, well, semi-claim to fame in that I think our build of Canterbury Stories was probably one of the first of Islandora 8, now Islandora 2, to go live. So we're quite proud of that, but it was a bit of a pioneering effort, and we're still unpacking a few of the early platform configurations that landed at that point. Anyway, let's move on to observability. Sorry, my browser's obviously working quite hard here on these transitions. So the challenge, at least in our experience, Islandora stack is complex, right? We've got a whole bunch of containers, a lot of microservices. We've got message flows, we've got queues. There's quite a few places where things can break down. So if, for example, you uploaded an image and you didn't get a thumbnail derivative being generated, then, where in the stack did that fall apart? Is your configuration correct? Did you upload, from a content point of view, did you upload the right file to the right content type and the right field? Is the Drupal config okay? Have you misconfigured it somehow? Did the message get generated and was it received by Houdini? Did Houdini generate a thumbnail, or did it choke because of the color table or something like that in the image? Was the image too big to be processed? All of that. Did the image derivative actually get posted back to Drupal? There's a whole stack of possible places where things can break down. Similarly, if you've got performance issues, well, where do you start? There's so many components involved. It can be a bit difficult to get a handle on where time might be being soaked up. Are people seeing slides, just by the way? Just want to double check that.
Yeah,
yep,
sorry.
cool, thank you. All right.
Jonathan, can I, because I just want to say this part explicitly as well. It's not so much that there's lots of places where things can go wrong, but there's a lot of places where things are happening out of your visibility, right? They're happening behind the scenes. And I think that's whether they break there is one thing, but it's hard to see what's happening is I think, really critical point there.
Precisely. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, so that brings in the whole concept of observability. And traditionally, observability has three main components. People talk about being able to observe metrics, which is the numeric factors of workload, etc., CPU utilization, all that kind of stuff. Your logs, and obviously Drupal, Islandora, with so many different containers, has got a whole stack of different logs coming out from different places, and you've got challenges in terms of PHP logging style versus Java and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got traces. So traces are essentially logs that have context. So it's not just an event happened, it's an event happened and it happened because it was called by something else. So you start to get that traceability through your entire stack in theory. And back in the day, there were things like application performance management tools and New Relic and Datadog and various others. There was an initiative called Open Tracing, which potentially started to answer some of these questions for people in terms of giving some observability of the application. But often, especially for New Relic and others, you needed to install a proprietary binary on your server for their agent to gather the data, and that's not something we can do with most of our customers. And since then, we now have the whole OpenTelemetry project. And their definition of observability includes this statement, which I quite like. So an application is properly instrumented when developers don't need to add more instrumentation to troubleshoot an issue because they've already got all the data they need to diagnose. So the beauty of that is if your app is constantly streaming its state and its behavior out to a service that you can then use to inquire, it means you don't need to respond to an issue with going into a bit of the code and adding some extra debugging or anything like that, because you've already got the data that you need to understand the behavior. And that's quite a profound shift of approach, because at the very least, if you have your application constantly streaming out all of the data, then you begin to understand what normal looks like, and you understand the fluctuations and variance that's natural. And that helps you spot when there's a problem or something that's unexpected or unusual. And I think that's quite a vital understanding to gain. Just want to give a quick example on the border of observability. And it was just about using an external tool that we plugged into we tend to use into our development stack. And we tend to use Lando, so it's a wrapper for Docker. It adds a lot of nice tooling around the Docker environment. And what the issue was that we were seeing around 30-second response times or build times for a search results page, which is clearly unacceptable. And we used the simple profiling extension, which is a PHP extension. And this just here is the command that we used in our Lando/Docker builds to pull that extension in during build time. And what that lets you do is build a flame graph. So it's essentially a profiling tool. If I quickly load the page for SPX, you'll get a wee sense of what it builds. Just excuse my browser is slow here. So I recommend this as it's a great way to get some understanding of the dynamics of your application. So you get this this red through yellow through green as the flame graph. So it's basically once you've got SPX installed, you would then go to application, load the problematic page, in this case search results, and it will build a profile of every single function that was invoked during that response. And in the case of the search results, it was about 2.3 million function calls happened, and that was captured in about 56 meg, sorry, of data. And it built a picture like this. So this is partly zoomed in. This is not a live, this is just a static image. But what you can see here is that basically every result, the 15 results in the search, were taking 2 seconds to do some processing, and it came down to a theme function that had been inherited from a community theme, where it was basically trying to look up some alt text for the media, and that was proving to be a very expensive call. So once we'd identified that, we could basically bypass that function and return search results to an acceptable level. I just thought it was a good example for people who might be running into similar challenges. It's not full observability by any respect, but it just demonstrates how you can plug an additional tool into your dev chain and get some good insight. So let's move to observability proper, and specifically the OpenTelemetry project. So some of the building blocks that we need is the PHP extension for observability, and there's also classes for Java, etc., which we haven't got around to trying yet. You'll want the Drupal OpenTelemetry module, and then you need to send that data somewhere. So we've been primarily using Grafana to date, and it has an agent called Alloy, which is an implementation of the OpenTelemetry collector, and then Grafana, either locally hosted or cloud hosted. So I'll just go through those in a bit more detail. Sorry, jump through. So just quickly on OpenTelemetry. Just by the way, I proposed tracing for Islandora in an issue 1304 quite some time ago. So this is in the Islandora issue queue dating from 2019, so almost 6 years ago. Back then, the tools of choice were something like Jaeger and Open Tracing. But since that time, the OpenTelemetry project has been created to kind of unify a lot of the tooling and essentially provide an open standard. And it's in the reading I've done to date, I'm quite impressed. Like, the docs are comprehensive. There's a lot of moving parts, but there's good working examples, and it's a pretty approachable, stack of technology. It's available for PHP and Java and a whole stack of other languages. And you can use the OpenTelemetry protocol to feed metrics, logs, traces, etc. to analysis in a tool like Grafana, but Datadog and Honeycomb and a whole stack of vendors have sprung up, and they can work with OpenTelemetry data. So first component that you need is the PHP extension for OpenTelemetry. Again, just like the SPX extension, we can invoke it as part of our build, and we just referencing the OpenTelemetry component. And then once that's installed correctly, you'll see it pop up in your PHP info. So you can see that you've got the extension and you've enabled it. There's an OpenTelemetry module for Drupal. I have to say the developer's gone a little bit quiet in recent times, so I'm not quite sure what the status is, but it is usable. There are a couple of patches that you need to apply to make it usable, so I've listed those here. Well, you only need this first one, really, this message body missing from logs. The Grafana Cloud one you don't specifically need unless you're using Grafana Cloud. And to date, we've been using Grafana Cloud. Just the free tier has been fine while we're kind of getting established. And Chris has been working with Grafana locally as well. And then you need to configure the OpenTelemetry module. So there's a few, there's a bunch of fields that you need to set up, but the defaults are mostly usable. But the main thing is just to connect it across to the Alloy, to tell it where to send the data out of PHP and into the Alloy collector. And in this case, we're using protobuf as a method, and we've got debug mode enabled and so on. So now we have our PHP knows about instrumentation, and we've now enabled it in Drupal. By default, we're using the default request trace. Now we need to configure Grafana Alloy, which is the OpenTelemetry collector. So that's the system that gathers the data and streams it out to where it's going to stay for analysis. So we're running Grafana Alloy. It has a config file, And amongst other things, it will build a graph of the components in the system. And you can also do live debugging of that. So this is what it looks like running on our dev environment. And you can see some of the components there, and it just indicates which items are being fed by which other components. And then if I go to a specific page, now I have the debugging enabled on the module. So if I refresh this page, it's telling me that it's generating traces. Like normally you would not enable that because you don't want your users to see these kind of messages. But I tend to have it enabled just so I can see what's happening. And then over some of these components in Alloy allow live debugging. So you can see all of the data that those traces generated now getting streamed out to Grafana Cloud. It is also possible to connect directly from Drupal to Grafana Cloud or Grafana without going through Alloy, but Alloy kind of gives you some scalability because it's a local collector, so it can absorb a whole lot more data rather than having, and then it can buffer it and fire it out over the internet as needed. And Alloy also just annotates the data with some details, so it can give a bit more. It can attach data in terms of the OS version and things like that to the traces. So that was that screenshot of the graph that it builds. And then Grafana or whatever other tool, Datadog or Honeycomb or whatever, you need some kind of UI for your data. Chris, did you want to speak to Grafana a bit more?
Sure. Yeah, so naming wise, this can be confusing because we've got Grafana Alloy and Grafana's Prometheus, but Grafana is the user interface that presents these dashboards. You might have come across it before because it's well established, and it's already worked before OpenTelemetry existed with other tools like Graphite, other collection agents like Collectd. And those things, I'm still using those alongside the newer OpenTelemetry toolkit. So you may have some tooling and some dashboards that this can work alongside. Yeah, it's a fantastic tool for dashboarding and presenting and discovering the information you want. The things that we've used it for, we're using only metrics initially for discovering the causes of events by looking at the time and the correlating all of the behaviors of a system. Incredibly useful, and OpenTelemetry opens that up by giving us much more detail than was previously available.
So I'll just show a few examples of once you've got this kind of observability stack in place, just some of the details that you can pull out. Again, this is all pretty simple stuff for the time being, but we hope to build on this and get a lot more data coming out. So again, looking at those three pillars, metrics, logs, and traces, but the metrics can have different sources. So initially, you can fire up something like, if you're using Apache, you can run the mod status and expose that, and then tell Alloy where to scrape the data from, and it will just, on a timer, it'll just do regular requests to that server status data and parse it and then pass it through. So basically you have this Prometheus scrape, and then it's pushing that data out to Grafana. And that lets you...
Those Prometheus blocks are examples from your config Alloy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is what you might see in Grafana. So this is Apache's internal stats being exposed. So the Apache CPU time, the CPU load, etc., number of processes, all that kind of stuff. So just good basic metrics. Here's Chris. Do you want to talk about this dashboard that you built?
Yeah, so this is a based on a sample dashboard, and it's showing system metrics. So what you're seeing is more at the operating system level, the I/O and memory and CPU load. But you can correlate these against the Apache metrics that you might be seeing, or the Cantaloupe metrics that you might be seeing, to identify what those peaks and troughs mean as part of the system. This is probably as high level as the dashboards get, but a good way to see how happy the systems are.
Thanks. You can also get metrics from Drupal, and obviously that will vary based on how you're using Drupal. But once you have the OpenTelemetry PHP extension, you can define what they call gauges, and you can mint those yourselves. So in this case, I've written a event subscriber, and basically when it finishes a request, it builds a gauge that simply does a count of nodes. But obviously in the Islandora context, that could be a lot more interesting. You could potentially generate stats in terms of the number of collections and the objects in collections and the various flavors of media and the counts for those, whatever is useful to you in terms of understanding the data that you want to keep some kind of track of in some kind of dashboard. So this just shows it building the gauge and then calling a function that I've told it to call, which is get node count. And obviously you'd want to add some caching to this kind of thing if you're going to be attaching it to the close down of a request. You don't want to be doing expensive calculations every request. But that's the kind of thing you can do, and then feed that through. And obviously when it gets to Grafana, you can expose that how you want. You could you get a simple graph, which is that we have 277 nodes. This is obviously a play example, but you could ultimately build a dashboard with all the kind of data that you care about. Logs, so that's the next pillar where we want to ship logs from a variety of containers and make sense of those and correlate those. Chris, do you want to pick this up?
Yeah, so let me just find my notes, please. What we're seeing here is maybe an hour's worth of log traffic, and we can see a change in behavior, and we'd probably expect to see a change, that dip just before halfway through. We'd expect to see some metrics line up with that, and if I was investigating an event, this is likely where I'd start looking at the metrics and then looking at the logs and identifying, interesting log entries. In order to have them, in the past, this was a matter of getting logs from, like, an absolute spray of logs from multiple systems, some of which I would need to request access to because, operations, and then try and correlate them locally. Once you get the timestamps aligned in a system like this, you can zoom in and out of, that 1 minute where the event starts, or and you can see broadly across all of the systems that were in operation, and I see where there might have been an error or a warning, which is the sort of clue that's really hard to find when you've got, a 700 megabyte daily log to filter through, and you're trying to exclude that and line things up by approximate timestamps or IP addresses, which change as the request flows through multiple systems. The next point to correlate those is tracing IDs, but even just having the timestamps aligned makes a huge difference. Yeah, so this here I've got a panel for access logs and application logs. The access being the public facing side of the requests, that's like a data stream of input that clients are making, and then the application logs is how they respond. But you would slice and dice that many different ways, depending on what you were looking into.
And we have a bit of configuration for how Alloy handles the logs.
Yeah, so an interesting aspect of trying to correlate the Islandora logs was that I came across lots of different timestamp formats, and I know that some of them are our own companies introduced timestamps in this logging setup too, because Islandora doesn't ship with Varnish. But I found 11 so far different formats for recording the time of a request. And so what this is demonstrating is we're ingesting a set of logs. This is from a local Lando or Docker setup where the logs have been mapped from a Tomcat container into the Alloy container so that Alloy can read and pass them. And I'm giving Alloy some labels with the log format and log time format there. So the third one, the application I'm using in that panel that we just looked at to kind of label the logs as what you're looking at and what application it came from. But the time format that we apply as a label to each log entry here will be used in the next slide to comprehend what the timestamp of that log entry was. You would also here have to think about multi-line processing, because by default they'll all be handled as a single line entry, and that means that a backtrace, especially in Java but also in PHP, is going to often look like a bunch of split apart data, and we want to bring that back together or keep it together so that when it's viewed in Grafana you can see that error and the full backtrace that goes with it. So we apply a log time format here, we label it Oracle, and then we move on to the next processing stage. Next slide, please, Jonathan. After working with Alloy for a bit, I realized that what I was looking at was a data pipeline, right? So you're ingesting a lot of records, which are log entries, and you're passing them through a process pipeline, not unlike, Drupal migrate or something, an ETL process. And so each stage in this pipeline, you can make changes. This stage matches based on the time format, different time format, different pattern here, and applies an expression which would capture the... I've just realized I see a bug in my slide. I hate that. I'm not going to talk to it, but but we capture the timestamp, and then we'll pass that on and tell Alloy how to interpret the time. That's a Go time format on the bottomish line. And I have I'll add a link to the slides later of like a snippet that you can use to test Go time passing. So then we'll put the correct timestamp on the log, not the time that it was seen or ingested by Alloy, and that will help us make sure that those logs all line up correctly. I've disappeared my notes. I hope I've said the right things. Am I missing anything, Jonathan?
No, that's about it. You do mention the Go time parsing, but we'll pull that out of the speaker notes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Cool.
So the other pillar that we are interested in is traces. So like I said, the OpenTelemetry module for Drupal provides a default request trace. So just for any request made to Drupal, it's going to generate a trace. But we want to not just see the overall trace, but potentially functions and sub requests within that. So in this case, I was interested in what percentage of time generating the search results was taken up by talking to Solr. So in this case, again, using an event subscriber from Solarium, an event subscriber for Solarium events, we have a pre-execute and post-execute request. So essentially we stand up a new span. So we get the current trace that's in progress and we build a span, and we attach some arbitrary data to that. So in this case, I wanted to see the raw data of the Solr request, just for interest, for debugging purposes. But you could expand that and attach a whole lot of arbitrary data to your traces. And then when we get the post-execute request, when Solr returns, then we close the span. And what that looks like in practice, we have the screenshot here. So you've got the overall request coming into Drupal, which was a search, and then you can see the Solarium execute. So the overall elapsed time for that search result in this case was around 4 seconds, which is not great, but this is just a dev server. But you can see within that 4 seconds, only 248 milliseconds was taken up by solar. So solar tends not to be the bottleneck in these cases. Just I can risk to trying to do a live demo. So if I go to search here, and I will do a search for, instead of Canada, I'll say Vancouver. Do a request on my local dev. That should generate some traces. Okay, so we generated some traces. And then if I jump over to, in this case, Grafana Cloud, and refresh at this end, then I can see the trace coming through with any luck.
Is it your observation that traces sometimes take a few moments to show up in the front end?
They usually pretty snappy. I think I'm not quite sure why it's a bit slow this time, because normally this would have resolved. Maybe I'll just refresh the whole page for a second. Yeah, normally it's surprisingly quick, considering it's transiting, you know, half the globe probably.
I think that there may be a delay where the trace isn't revealed until the collection system. There's the alloy processing, which is a pipeline. But I think there may be a delay where it's waiting to see if there's more trace components arriving and organizing them. Just
Maybe
based on tests. Yeah.
So just here's the overall request. So this is within Grafana, the traces drill down, and you can see that we've got our overall request, which took 2.67 seconds. And by default, there's a bunch of attributes attached to that. So these tend to be, the span attributes tend to be a bit more application orientated, and then the resource attributes tend to be a bit more infrastructure orientated. So what version of OS, etc., and Apache are you sitting on? And then if we close that top trace, top span rather, and look at the Celerium execute, then you can see within the span attributes that there's that raw data that I attached. So it's a way of shipping what they call wide events in observability land. You can attach arbitrary data, and then your tooling like Grafana or Honeycomb or whatever will let you drill down on that in various ways. And obviously, as you go into production, then you can start looking at sampling strategies and so forth to deal with volume. So that's a demonstration of what the stack kind of looks like, and some examples of what you can pull through. So just a few issues and challenges. Feel free to jump in here, Chris. One of the things that should be possible is it should be possible to use PHP annotations. So basically attaching with span and just sprinkling that annotation on top of specific Drupal functions that you're interested in, like, you know, start building a view or whatever. But what I've found is, while that kind of works, it generates what's called a non-recording span, and that doesn't propagate to Grafana. So I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong there. I need to dig into that. We would like to get into tracing all the way through to the microservices. So that implies that we propagate a span or generate a span ID and push that through ActiveMQ, such that the request that goes to a microservice like Houdini has got the span context. And that way we would get, you know, deeper into the Islandora stack. Obviously, Chris, you ran into issues getting logs from so many different applications, etc., and formats. Another challenge is, especially if you are sending to a cloud Grafana instead of local, you may want to be aware of your IP addresses and emails and any other personally identifying information, and date formats. Do you want to add anything to that, Chris?
Date formats, I think I said my thing. The P2 aspect, I would recommend treating all of this. My suggestion is don't tell yourself you're going to take P2 out of the data captured. From those brief expansions of the server data that you saw Jonathan show in the last, you know, in that span example, the level of data that you get is super rich, and it's great for debugging, and it feels surveillance adjacent to me, and there's no way you can do this without capturing a lot of information about what people are searching for, where they're coming from. You have to take that seriously, I think, because it's by default personal data, and it's going to capture more than you would expect. So take good care with your users' data, please.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, just to kind of wrap up, I guess the question is, is this kind of material, kind of functionality and capability desired by the Islandora community? I kind of hope it is. And if so, is it something we can start baking into, for example, ILDC? We could certainly help with that based on the work that we've done to date. But maybe people have got other ideas about to what extent observability should be shipped with Islandora. Yeah, and I've also added just some links to resources. So if you are new to observability, then these are some of the resources that I've found useful. One is there's been a good presentation by Alexei Karpov at the last couple of Islandora conferences around Drupal observability in general. And he's also the author of the Drupal Open Telemetry module. There's some generic insights into observability from Charity Majors, and her book, and along with this other one by Steve Flanders, are both really worthwhile. So unless, Chris, you've got anything else you want to add, we can open it up for some questions.
I am keen also to share the demo environment which I've been using to test, which is Lando based, because that's what we do a lot of our development in, but the Alloy and Docker and Islandora components of that recycle well. I can run the same thing in Docker Compose without Lando needing to be in the mix, so that's not a hard requirement. But that will give much better examples of what we've been doing so far. And yeah, I'll get that link on the slides as well, I think.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I guess if we have time for questions, we'll take those.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left. If folks want to pop any questions or thoughts in the chat, or unmute and ask them yourself.
Thanks, Don. Yes, it's been helpful. It's really good.
Okay, Annie's saying there's been some interest in the tech calls.
I'll just say that I found that presentation really interesting, and thank you for doing it. I'm Natalie from University of Iowa, because we've talked a lot about just how poor sometimes the search is, and thinking that we could change, make it better through something like views or an advanced search or faceting, but this puts a totally different element on it for me, and I'm excited to see people work on it for that reason.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah, visibility into the system makes a huge difference between, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting your comments right, but for me, being able to see how the search works under the hood changes how I think about search working. And Jonathan's the search expert relative to me, but often I'll see some of that stuff and go, oh, right, that's what's going on here, where before it was a bit of a sealed box for me. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Yes.
Yeah, that's why I commend Charity Majors. If you get the chance to watch that video, for example, I think she's done a lot of thinking about what observability means in practice, and I think it's quite a profound distinction or development in terms of having the technical insights and moving beyond a reactive kind of posture to, heck, something's on fire or something's broken, we have to dive in and try to fix it. Instead, you're moving to a way more kind of proactive stance where you're constantly aware of application state, and you can constantly optimize and improve the customer experience based on, or the user experience based on what you're seeing, and potentially intervening to resolve issues before it becomes something that's affecting people at the front end. So I think there's a lot of really interesting thinking going on in that space. And these days, of course, once you have built up a lot of this data and fed it into some of the tooling, of course, is becoming AI enhanced and all that kind of stuff. So it can start to learn patterns and alert you to anomalies and all that kind of stuff. So there's some really interesting stuff there.
I think that an illuminating moment reading Charity's book on observability was the naming of how we often create dashboards to show how a system is operating, and then we learn to read that dashboard, but it's at a very intuitive level where you look at it and you go, oh, that looks about right, or oh, that doesn't look right. And for someone not familiar with that same dashboard where it's showing many metrics, and you've kind of learnt that, oh, if I look top left and there's a lot of red, like that's I'm not against intuitive response to things, but to make it informed, to take it from looks wrong to this is what I'm seeing, giving the depth of observability is a real game changer, where your ops response could be more intuitive in the past, like could have been from a more intuitive place, and that was great, but it takes a lot of learning how the dashboards ought to look, right? Yeah.
Hi, yeah, this was great presentation, really interesting work here. I'm hearing, so it sounds like maybe there's some possibility of integrating this in ILDC, ILBuildKit, somewhere around there, but in your slides, it sounds like you're using Grafana Cloud. Have you ran Grafana locally to ingest all these metrics and data? And like, what was the performance of that? Was that ran on the same system that all the metrics are getting emitted from? Or have you gone down that route before?
Yes. So I kicked off with I was already running Grafana locally with Graphite, so it wasn't a big leap to run Grafana locally with the new OpenTelemetry stack added. And there's I'll drop a it's the fuller stack is still an emerge request, but I'll just drop a GitHub URL. And which is, I'll finish talking, then I'll type. A Lando environment that is only a Grafana stack. So it's not a web server development environment, though it contains an Apache server which will relay to the Grafana stack as a demonstration. And this is just a way of wrapping up Grafana into a Docker local environment. Performance-wise, it doesn't seem to give the system as hard of a time as I expected it might. And then I started by grabbing production logs, pulling them down using SSH's SCP, and ingesting them directly into the stack via like a local directory. And so it was reading hundreds of megabytes of daily logs and slicing and dicing them so that I could see how that would work. This is a really good way for me to test the Alloy configuration that I would need in production without needing to push an Alloy configuration out to staging a lot of times. I can do all of that development locally, work out what I might need to change for logback or Tomcat logging properties or PHP's logging, and submit those changes. It works great locally, and by having it in a Lando environment, I was able to send, so I've got 2 Islandora environments which I might be developing on locally as well, and they can both, rather than growing the ILDC or Lando stack out to include Grafana and Prometheus and Loki and Tempo and Mimir and Alloy, I could add only Alloy to that stack and then have a separate environment which was receiving all of that data and processing it It means there's two separate environments to run side by side, but it keeps the change minimal in those customer environments where, or the Islandora projects. Yeah, it's possible to ship all of Grafana locally, but I think an easier first step, if it works for people, is to ship Alloy only locally and have a separate instance, which can be their hosted product or your local Docker or whatever Grafana environment. And that might be like your internal self-hosted environment, because you're labeling all of the data that you're generating with the name of the project, or optionally perhaps the developer's laptop host name, then your whole team can ship all of that metrics and open telemetry data into a common environment that you host internally. So that's an approach you could take as well, and you can do that from Docker Compose, which is quite accessible. I run a Docker Compose version of the same thing locally, so yeah. Did I answer your question, Joe?
I don't know. So I understand how you could ingest logs. So those are sitting statically on like your production site. I guess I don't understand. I would be curious. And I think this will be an ongoing conversation. I think there's a lot of interest here, and I think this is a good path to continue forward. But just if you have hotel metrics getting emitted from a production site, I don't understand how that would get.
Oh, no, I agree with you. That would be significant, and that's where sampling rates come in. So you might sample 1 in 100 requests.
I see.
You can tune that down, because otherwise your web server would be sending like 8 kilobytes back to the client and megs over there. I don't made up numbers, but yeah, your intuition is correct. There would be a lot of network traffic going off that box in order to capture all of this data. I mean, as Jonathan mentioned with SPX, capturing the function calls and the behavior of an operating system, a system in operation, or Xdebug, they're huge files. It's a huge amount of data, and yeah, I don't know the size of the network traffic for hotel, but I would expect it to be significant because the data we get on the other side is lots. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Right.
I'll finish typing that URL.
I think we're running up to time, but happy to keep these conversations going. We can have them in Slack, in the appropriate channels, and we can also continue talking throughout the conference. But thank you very much to Dawn and to Jonathan and Chris for your presentation. That was wonderful. I just want to, before we fully wrap up, go ahead and share let's see, our day 2 agenda here, just so that folks have that on their radar for what's coming up for tomorrow. But otherwise, I will see you all in Slack, and thank you all for your participation and your wonderful presentations. It's been a great first day of IslandoraCon, so thank you all very much.
Thanks all.
Thanks.